Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 77 of Chatting with Nuts. And we have a reoccurring guest tonight who's just a cool dude with some cool glasses, in my opinion. And I'm happy to have him back for what is his second appearance on Chatting with Nuts. And that is Jared Henderson. How are you doing, dude?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. I got to tell you, though, I'm getting new glasses like in like a couple of weeks. So
why?
Yeah. Well, it turns out my eyes are weird and they discovered something weird about them. So I need new lenses. And then I realized, oh, I could like get new frames too. They're going to be very simple. I've locked into the tiny circles.
I love the circles personally. Yeah. The first person I ever saw rock the circles was Lawrence Krauss, and unfortunately, he's insane now. But I always thought he made it look good, and he did do it before it was cool. I think.
Yeah. Like I think the circle glasses work. I finally figured out glasses that look good on me, so I'm just going to wear them for the rest of my life. So I think round frames, as long as I can keep finding them, I'll be good.
Yeah, it's tough to get away from a pair of glasses that you think you look nice in because there's so many glasses that don't look good. There's so many. I got glasses for the first time in like 6 years, and they had nose pieces. Now I haven't had glasses with nose pieces in years. And at the shop, I was like, these look really nice. You know, this will be good on camera. I filmed my first video with them, and I was like, nope. I had to go to Warby Parker and buy new glasses. I was like, I can't do it. That was the first and only video I did without glasses, and everyone commented and was like, "Where are your glasses, bro?"
As you go through and you're like trying different frames on, you like put on a familiar pair and you're like, okay, looks about the same. Pick out something new. Let's be a little adventurous. Put this on. And you're like, I am a gargoyle. Like I am hideous. They would put me on cathedrals to scare the demons. Like this. And it's because I chose a slightly different shape.
Yeah, like I like big glasses, but not too big because without, then you start noticing that my eyes aren't even, I got a crooked nose a little bit from a fight back in the day. There's little things that I'm trying to hide with my glasses, I've never really enjoyed.
What are you trying to hide?
Insecurities,
peel back the layer.
Self-loathing, these typical things that we all go through. By the way, folks, as you can tell, doing a little different setup here. So let us know what you think it looks like. I know 99% of you don't actually care because you're just listening, but I am trying a little bit of a different approach, and we're going to continue to try new things with Chatting with Nuts in its presentation. Jared, you're one of the people I like bouncing ideas off of because I think you have good taste, and I think you also have good ideas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Thank you.
The big difference, though, between this episode and the last episode that you were on, and it's an interesting difference, is you are jobless because you got fired.
I did get fired. Or as a few people who were angry in the comments told me that my title was clickbait because I got laid off. But
so you weren't building a clubhouse with boxes.
Exactly. It doesn't feel very different in the moment as it's happening. But yeah, I got laid off 2 weeks ago. Got my last paycheck yesterday.
Yeah, and you had just, kind of made a big purchase. Like things were changing rapidly.
Yeah. I bought a house on like a Thursday, moved in on Friday, and was laid off on Monday. So
that's not great.
No,
that's not exactly what you're looking for. I think I would be a mess, but you seem to take it. You took it pretty well.
It's all the Stoicism that I read that helps a lot. But
Stoicism, that's when you don't feel anything, right? Is that
exactly?
Okay, I'm making sure.
The answer to that's actually complicated. We could talk about that later. I've been thinking a lot about it, but I mean, what it meant was like I had to focus on what actually was in with my control, because as soon as you get the notification, like it's like, oh, okay, cool, I'm jobless. Like, what can I do now, right? And I'm just not someone to like wallow and stuff. I just got to get over it, because whatever. If you wallow, all you've done is just like let them steal more of your time, basically. So I just started thinking about what I could do, and honestly, it was my wife who was like, "You have wanted to go full time on YouTube for a while, but you've been like afraid to give up your tech like salary. Just do it." Like, they're giving me some severance, so I got like a little bit of runway, and it was just like, just go for it. Just go full time on YouTube, make more videos, make the videos you've wanted to make for a long time, like the longer ones and stuff. I've talked a little bit about that. Write more on Substack, been doing that a lot more. Got a ton of support on that early on. And so it was like, oh, I'm like really close to actually being able to support my family writing and making videos, and which is like what I've wanted to do for ages at this point, but probably would have never had the courage to like just take the leap.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well now I've been forced, like the mama bird has pushed me out of the nest, right? And I'm either gonna like die and like, you know, have my broken wings on the ground, or I am, you know, I'm gonna fly. So yeah.
Sink or swim. Putting yourself, I mean, nobody wants to be put in those situations, but a lot of times that's when you kind of find out things about yourself. I got laid off 2000 and man, I don't remember. It was like 2016, but I had been with Best Buy Corporation for like 7 years.
Okay.
And I was working from home for corporate as a support engineer. And they essentially brought in third party and they said, hey guys, you guys need to train these people. He said, they're not taking our jobs, are they? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
And then they took our jobs. They took our jobs. And so I got laid off. And man, it was a really scary time. You know, me and my wife, girlfriend at the time, you know, we had talked about, you know, getting married, and she was graduating from grad school. And it was like this big changing, you know, point in our lives. And it was terrifying. But if that had not happened, I would have never learned how to code. I wouldn't have gotten the, you know, the position I'm in now. And I certainly wouldn't have been making videos on YouTube on a very nice Lumix camera. So, so it's terrifying, but I think with your attitude and your work ethic, I think that, you know, you're going to be just fine. And having the permission to do something that you've wanted to do is actually really big. Steven Erickson talks about that all the time, and why he thinks that like joining a writing program or a workshop or something like this, it's not necessarily about the workshop or what they're going to teach you. It's actually about giving yourself time and permission to use that time to write. And that kind of makes me think of what, you know, you're going through.
I mean, yeah. So my wife's, you know, my wife's finishing her PhD. She's going to be a doctor, you know, well, a doctor in philosophy like me in like a month. And so she's obviously going through a busy time, but like, she's been great. She's just like, what can I do to make sure that you have enough time to like make the stuff that you want to make? Right. Cause I'd like to be getting to the point where I'm putting out a video a week, which, considering the harder and like longer videos I'm working on, is actually like quite a bit of work. Like it takes a lot of time. And so, you know, it would be a lot. And now I'm writing like 4 posts on Substack a week or something like this, which is like quite a bit of words. And what's been lovely though is just like making the time and just like doing this stuff. And like, I don't know, I feel like I should be more depressed after getting laid off, or I should be like more anxious. And occasionally it comes up suddenly, the anxiety like bubbles up suddenly and wants to say, but what happens in 3 months, you know, something, but I don't know. And I just feel really good. I feel really happy, you know? So, and yeah, I got my like severance agreement this morning. You know, I just like, they sent it to me on the day, because like that was the day they were going to do it. And I was like, I just signed it. I just didn't feel anything. Basically, it was just a sign. I was like, okay, cool, it's done. You know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, also with like, you know, work and stuff, you can let it affect you a lot. Like I got really irrationally angry this week about something at work that didn't make any sense. And then I think whenever like this type of thing happens, like you realize how much it doesn't matter, which is in its way kind of like a reprieve from the everyday monotony, you know, and the mundane stuff. So I think you have a great attitude about it. I'm very curious to see where you go with this thing, because you're talking about going full time, and you cover like so many different topics on your channel. Obviously you're a philosopher, but you also love reading, which is why, you know, me and you ended up connecting and then bringing you on here, which is great. So what do you think is like the next step for you and your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be more and longer like videos about philosophy. I think I've basically topped out as many book lists as like I could ever do.
Oh no, there's people out there. They'll put you to shame. They put
I've done like 5 top 10s of different kinds of things, or 4 top 10s of various things. I've done lots of beginner friendly philosophy book stuff, or you know, whatever, or lots of philosophical science fiction stuff. I'm now gonna like focus on like longer form, more involved, more informative videos that I think, because I think actually the way I kind of, my sort of feel of the pulse on YouTube is that people want longer and more in-depth content, but they would also like it to still feel conversational. They want it to feel like approachable. And I mean, if I could just like, my one thing that I think is like one of my strengths is that even if I'm talking about philosophy or whatever, I can still kind of feel like just like a guy you're chatting to. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like I'm lecturing you. At least that's what I'm hoping for. And so I'm really kind of leaning in on that. Yeah.
I mean, for how much Alan hates philosophers, Alan likes you. So I think that that's a really good sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
That your
This is a
delivery
This is a reminder that one day I want to do the tripartite chatting with nuts.
the first ever. I think.
Yeah.
No, I think I had 2 guests at one point when it was Ben the Knee, but you've reached out and you said, I need to be on a stream with Alan. I want to talk to the man himself. And Alan also is refuting that he hates philosophers. It's more the idea of a philosopher, Alan, that that you hate, I think.
Yeah.
But your delivery is very approachable, which I appreciate. And last time we talked, I don't know if you remember this, but we kind of talked about like, well, where should I start? And you recommended the Gay Science by Nietzsche. And I am very confused because I opened up and there was 0 femboys. Like there was nothing gay about it. And I was disappointed and I gave it a 0 out of 5 on Goodreads.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It didn't have the right tropes, right?
Nietzsche invented clickbait. He invented clickbait.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes translated as like the joyful art or something like this. But like it's just like Gay Science is just such a better
it's a great title.
It's such a better title, but it's about troubadours, right? So read Song for Our Bond and then read the Gay Science. Like that's what it's inspired by. Yeah.
Actually, that's a pretty devious duo. I kind of enjoy the idea of reading this back to back.
Yeah.
Alan says Plato is the worst. You should definitely do a top 10 worst philosophers video. I think that would probably get the clicks.
I thought about doing one about not top 10 necessarily, but just like the most evil philosophers, like the philosophers who have just like arguably led to the most evil in the world.
Schopenhauer, is that his name? Is that the one that's like,
I don't know if Schopenhauer's going to be super high on the list, but there's like, I'm going to keep this list close to the chest in case I actually want to use it.
Fair.
But,
I will steal it. I will.
The problem is like, it's assessing actually what they're responsible for or how much they directly influenced. Because I think you could make this argument like that Plato is the most evil philosopher just because he's just had the biggest impact. So he's also had like the biggest negative impact.
Yeah, just his range is so wide. The shot was so wide that of course somebody would take it and run with it, right?
Like I once tried to figure out like how would you determine what the most important book of all time is, right? And the answer I think is probably the Bible. And it's part of the reason it's the Bible is just because like it's really old.
Have you read
it's
Swords?
Have I read what?
A Storm of Swords. I would like to enter into the ring and propose this. No, I think you're right. I think it's probably the Bible. Yeah.
So I think but that's just because it's like it's just had time. Like it's just had time to do it. So I don't know, like it becomes actually it ends up not being like an interesting video if you made that about that, right? Like because like the answer just becomes obvious. So
I mean, that's how I feel about making my own top 10 like favorite books list because everyone knows number 1 Storm of Swords, and I'm like, well, what's the point of making the video then, right?
Yeah.
It's when the answers are obvious, it doesn't feel as fun. Steve Donahue says, for all his gross diseases, Nietzsche would be more welcome on Chatting with Nuts than I am. So Steve, you've already been on Chatting with Nuts, so you've already beat Nietzsche. And gross diseases. Are there diseases that aren't gross? I'm very curious. Yeah. Is that possible?
If Steve had a mustache, maybe we would welcome him back.
I would be down with a Steve Donahue mustache. Yeah. I will absolutely. B says she puts up Twilight for the running of the most important book of all time. I mean, depending on who it is, it could possibly be. Now you're kind of talking about Substack, and I need to have you clarify this because whenever I saw your video about being laid off, I did tell people, okay, you can go support Jared here. He's been a friend to the channel. Can you explain to people what Substack is? Because a lot of people don't know what it is.
Okay, cool. So I kind of treat Substack like my version of Patreon. I still have a Patreon, but it's super tiny. I'm going to phase it out, right? But and I think that basically the first pitch for it is just like it's a place where you could just give me money every month if you wanted to support me making stuff, right? That's like one way which is basically what a Patreon is going to be. But in exchange, Substack is technically a newsletter platform. So you write a lot of you write text, right? And I've had one for like a while, and I was very inconsistent about it. But especially with the layoff, I've been writing just a ton. So I probably am averaging about between 5,000 to 7,000 words total going out every week on my Substack. And that's because I write 4 times a week of about 1,500 words each or so. And so. And what I do, so I've been doing a walkthrough of the Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which we're almost done with. I'm going to start doing a walkthrough of the Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. I actually send those posts out for free. Anybody who wants to sign up for the free version, because Substack, you can also just subscribe to just the free post. You would just get those for free. Cool. And then the rest of them are just paywalled, right? Like you can read part of them as previews, but you'd have to do the rest. I like it better than Patreon. 1, because it gives me an incentive to write more. And 2, I'm really bad about being able to do early access and stuff like this because like I'm usually editing up until like an hour before I post. And 3, I just kind of dislike the way that Patreon is kind of slowly turning itself into an e-commerce site that wants you to sell stuff. It's not why I signed up for Patreon, but that's like
I have plenty of issues with Patreon,
kind of where they're moving. And so I find with Substack, it's just easier for me to feel like I'm in control. I offer exactly what I say on Substack. So that's just my preference. I've had people reach out to me and say, I think you would get more supporters if you just did a Patreon because they've already saved their credit card information in Patreon. So they'll just add you, and right. And that's probably true. I get it, but I basically am just trying to do what I think works best for me long term. And like today I did a dumb essay about a Spanish idiom that's like I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not even going to try to say it, but the idiom translates to thinking about the immortality of the crab, which is how it's like an idiomatic response when you ask like what are you doing when you're daydreaming, you say you were thinking about the immortality of the crab. And I just like wanted to talk about that for a while, and I ended up talking a little bit about Dante and about why I think modern poetry sucks, and about why I like and about Thales, this philosopher, was one of the 7 sages of in Greece, who is notorious for being so transfixed on the stars that as he was walking, he fell into a hole, and an old woman yells like, "Oh, you astronomer, how can you gaze at the heavens if you can't even gaze at your own feet?" or something like that. Yeah. So that's what you can expect from Jared Substack. By God. Exactly. And we're going to start doing those chapter by chapter walkthroughs of the Nicomachean Ethics. I think pretty soon, actually, I'm going to start walking through or picking out highlights from this book, which isn't going to show up on camera well, which is Lives of the Eminent Philosophers by Diogenes Laertius. So, and Alan can tell me that I butchered the Latin there, and that's okay. But basically, he wrote these biographies of really important philosophers, and actually, it's through him that we know a lot about like a lot of early Greek philosophers whose texts don't survive, because he would also provide summaries of what they taught. So, like the earliest Stoics, like Zeno of Citium or Chrysippus or Cleanthes, we have very little of their writing, if any at all, but we know at least a little bit about them through Diogenes. Yeah, so I was gonna go through this, and it also just tells funny stories. So it's also just humorous, which is there's some that are really, really good. Yeah. So and Alan has noticed that it's the right edition. Alan knows. Yes. It's the low, yeah. I'm always impressed by how much knowledge is in the chat, because there's times like this where I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, that sounds really interesting, but I have no idea what those words actually mean. And then you have people in chat who are like, oh no, it's easy, of course. And then B's giving us the proper Spanish, which is fantastic. So you write mostly or almost all about philosophy on your Substack. You're not writing like short stories and stuff like this. No fiction. Okay. And I know I was working on some fiction stuff last time we talked. I think now I'm just not in fiction mode. I am working on a book project, a nonfiction book project that actually looks like it has legs. But it's mostly nonfiction. Occasionally I'm doing like once a month or so, I'm doing a little series that I'm calling Books Worth Your Time, which is just like book recommendations, because I'm not really doing book recommendations on the channel anymore. So it's just like a way for you to, like, if you wanted to hear from me about like books that I think are good, it's like it's a way to get it. And then occasionally I'll do like short book reviews of books that I think are really interesting. I read this great little book on the philosophy of anxiety by a guy named, I think it was Samir Chopra. I should remember his name because he emailed me, because he found the preview of it, but it was paywalled. He's like, can you maybe unlock that post just for me? So I had to like send him a copy so I could see what it says. And it was really cool. And I would love to write maybe 1,000-word sort of reviews of these more contemporary books that most people aren't going to hear about, right? Like, because they're not going to read that stuff.
Yeah, and I think people do take interest in what you read just because, like, you do read pretty widely. You're obviously a fan of fantasy and sci-fi, but you also do historical fiction, a lot of philosophy, nonfiction. So I think people like to see the opinions of people who are reading like that. And maybe they feel that you can bubble things up to the top of these genres or subsections of reading. There was a question here from Brand Sell Books. This question for both of you: what was a recent sci-fi read that you really enjoyed? And you had a video somewhat recently about some philosophical sci-fi reads that everyone should try out. So I figured this might be something you could answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, the most recent science fiction read that I've really been enjoying is just Sun Eater stuff. I'm not quite caught up on the series, but I've been like kind of dedicating myself to it lately, and like that's been great. Rockio is like king of the game right now. I'm not like looking forward to anyone else's science fiction in the way that I'm looking forward to Christopher Rockio's. The fact that Christopher Rockio is like blowing up on YouTube has just like made me so incredibly happy too. Like he's finally getting all this credit that I feel like he deserves. But what was that last one where I talked about philosophical science fiction? No, that was the wrong video. Just got on my monitor. I'm just like looking at videos.
Just admiring your own work.
Yeah. And we'll just look through the book list here. So, the most recent ones would be Sun Eater stuff. Babel 17, but that was like a year ago at this point.
Is that
my reading
Samuel Delaney?
Yeah, that's Samuel Delaney. That one's really that's really, really good. I haven't read as much science fiction lately though. In fact, my reading has slowed down a lot lately just because of the move and now some other stuff. And now what I'm working on, like if I'm doing a philosophy video, I'm spending a lot of time just reading the stuff again, so going through secondary text that I've never touched to like get commentary on it, so that, because especially with like, I'm working on this video about Stoicism here. I'm trying to make a really long explainer video about it. And I need to make sure that I'm not just perpetuating the same sort of myths that someone else would when they try to summarize stuff. I have to read the scholarly secondary sources who know the Stoic stuff way better than I ever will, because they're going to know that, you read some of these great like classicists or historians of ancient philosophy, and not only can they read Greek and Latin because like they've got better language skills than me already, but like they're often citing in at least German and French as well, like citing things there, and they're not translating those citations, so they're reading that stuff in the original language. So they're reading huge amounts of text to give the context for these things and to summarize them in a way that I just could not do. So but it still takes a lot of effort to even go through that stuff.
Yeah. And do you feel like, speaking of like Stoicism in general, obviously it's something that's misrepresented and co-opted for different reasons, especially online and in the YouTube space. Do you feel like, is that part of the mission of that video and that approach is like, let's try to get this right and show people like,
that's part of it. That's part of it, because I am someone who finds like the text very inspiring, but thinking through like the history of this whole idea, right? Like Stoicism, when you think about Stoicism, the name you're thinking of, right, is Marcus Aurelius, right?
I was going to go with Jocko Willink.
Okay. Yeah. But the point is, hundreds of years had passed between the founding of Stoicism to the point where it got to Marcus Aurelius. Hundreds of years. Occasionally, you'll find videos about Stoicism that call Marcus Aurelius one of the pioneers of Stoicism. Right? That's like saying that I am a pioneer of Texas. Because I moved, it just does not make any sense. Right? So you actually have to bother with, the problem is like the later later Stoic writers like Marcus Aurelius, who I like. I should say this, I like Marcus Aurelius. I like Seneca on The Shortness of Life, getting a shout out. I love that writing. One of the things I did in my Substack was partly inspired by a metaphor from that. It's got this great line, much voyaging, not much voyaging, but much tossing about, which we could talk about, which is just this killer line from that story. But anyway, like you think about those guys are there. It's really in Stoicism, but it's also been watered down a lot. They're not interested in the weird metaphysics that was going on at the time, or like the weird views of logic or the mind that the early Stoics had. They were just extracting the practical stuff, which is fine to do. But then we can't then say, oh, and now Stoicism was only about a practical life, right? You know, no, it wasn't. It had all this other stuff. And I just find that nobody talks about that. I mean, the best video about Stoicism, there's one from like, I think called like Let's Talk Religion or something like this, called What is Stoicism? That's pretty good. And Philosophy Tube did one on Stoicism that I thought was pretty good. And I just think there's more to be said. So I'm going to do the video, try to set the record straight as much as I possibly can, and then peace out and go on to the next topic.
That's really cool. I mean, it's certainly a broad subject with a lot of different angles to it. So it's not you're not beating a dead horse by any means, and hopefully clearing up some of the things, that get thrown around with AI generated muscle men and Marcus Aurelius quotes.
I've been Stoicism right now, man. All the thumbnails are AI muscle men who would have physiques that were literally not possible before the invention of like modern nutrition or steroids.
Yeah, an injectable.
Let's just be, yes, let's just be very, very clear here. Everyone's like, why did bodybuilders in the 20s not look jacked?
I got an answer that comes in about a CC needle size that you stick directly on top here.
Yeah.
Evie has a question. I like this question. So TLDR version for smooth brain people like me. Who are the actual pioneers of Stoicism that you would recommend?
Here's the problem you're going to face, Evie. It's a good question. It's a great question, actually. The first Stoic is Zeno of Citium. We have 0 of Zeno's writings. The second founder of Zeno starts a school at a place called the Stoa, and basically the full name, it translates to the painted porch. That's why they become Stoic. They're literally porch people. Like that's what it means, right? The second inheritor of the school, who was called a scholarch, is Cleanthes. We have one text from him called the Hymn to Zeus. And then with Chrysippus or Chrysippus, we have very little of his writing. But then you'll get other people trying to like put it all together. And the thing I would recommend if you wanted those the really early ones, is a book that I happen to have on my desk called The Stoic Reader, edited by Inwood and Gerson.
That cover art's not great.
It's not good. But Hackett, by the way, if you're looking for philosophy books, Hackett is the way to go, because it is so it's so cheap. They really make it affordable, right? So this is the way to go. And you'll get a bunch of people, but we get a lot of the Stoic stuff actually from summaries later on. So that's one of the problems you're going to face. I will say, Evie, if you want to know a little bit about early Stoicism, I do have a video called like "Don't Learn About Stoicism" from YouTube, which is a funny title considering what I do.
It's an intro. You can learn it at my Substack.
Yeah. But I would say honestly, Evie, if you can wait for a week, I'm gonna have a very, very long video about this. So that would be the place to check it out.
It's a great pitch. When you're going full time, you got to really think about the approach to these answers. You got to trail them to the Substack, bro.
Exactly. It's going to be the conversions from chatting with nuts that keeps my family afloat.
Of course. I mean, I literally, I provide for Alan. I would like to think I'm responsible for him being a homeowner. This is, we call him A-list Alan. Big money over here. So you were praising Christopher Rocchio, and you were, saying how obviously you had a lot of praise for that. You're in Demon and White, book 3. Book 2 and 3, that run, those 2 book runs, I mean, are 2 of my favorite books I've read. So why? Like, why do you like Rocchio so much? Like, what is it about his stuff that maybe puts it above the other sci-fi that you've read recently?
So there's a couple of things. One is, sometimes gets leveled as a criticism on Rocchio, which is that he wears his influences on his sleeve, right? The thing is that his influences are my favorite science fiction.
So it as well.
Like he is pulling from a lot of the things that I love. So that helps a lot. But one thing I think that doesn't, when you start with that, look, the execution is really good. He's really good. He's a good writer, like in a way that, I'm sorry, like a ton of science fiction these days just absolutely is unbearable to read. It just is not fun. It is not fun. It is not beautiful. It sucks. And so this is standing out, right? And ideally making Bain like the next giant publisher or something, because they're the ones who had the sense to sign him. Like, I just think it's just so head and shoulders better than the stuff that gets held up as good now, in a way that I find almost ludicrous, honestly.
Well, so I think one of the things about the science fiction is that there is a lot of stuff that leans more into that pop science thing, whereas where we're looking at something like a Sun Eater, you're very much getting a personable journey of Hadrian and this chronicling tale, and it just has a very different vibe than a lot of other things. You know, Evie's mentioning Ted Chiang, for instance. Ted Chiang short story collections, I think, are masterful, but they're science fiction. So is Sun Eater, and they're vastly different types of stories. So maybe it's a lack of the Sun Eater-esque type stories in sci-fi, possibly, and maybe that's filling this void. Something like Book of the New Sun, you know, like traveling with Severian and going through that mind-boggling journey is not something that we see all that often anymore in what's considered sci-fi. Some people would argue that it's sci-fantasy or it's not real sci-fi, which I think is, you know, so what's the cat's name? The cat is
Carl. Yeah.
Carl. What a great name.
Thank you.
What a great name. I love
cats. Yeah.
I'll be next. So maybe that's the void, right? Like that's the void within science, because you like Book of the New Sun, right?
I love Book of the New Sun. I love Book of the New Sun.
Yeah. And then Dune obviously is another huge influence on Rockio. And then have you read any Bijol?
I have not. No.
Okay, because I
should though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Carl is touching my camera. He's rubbing against it, so we're gonna push him away. Also, I think like in Demon and White, you see some influences from world building in from Stevenson, from like Anathema.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I am not well read in Stevenson. Like that.
So if you read Anathema, what's kind of revealed, this isn't a huge part of the plot, is just that like there are these scholars that because they got like they got a little ahead of themselves. They got too big for their britches and tried to do some stuff that was gonna destroy the world. And so that's why they've been like locked away into like their like monastic cells to do science. Like that's why the scholiasts exist, right? And so I think he's taking a little bit from that, taking it in a very different direction though.
Yeah. Okay. See, Neil Stevenson is a huge blind spot for me when it comes to, you know, this section of the genre. I have Diamond Age, I believe, is one of the ones I have, and I have book one in the Baroque cycle that I can't.
I would read the Baroque cycle. I would read Anathema. I would maybe not read. I would not read Snow Crash as your first Stevenson because it's so different than the rest. I like Seven. I like. It's shorter. It's punchier. It's written in a kind of almost ironic style at times, which it feels very different than the kind of over the top complexity that Stevenson sort of uses to characterize his other works. You know, but at the same time, Snow Crash is like incredibly important, right? So you might want to read it one day. It's just maybe not the thing I would think is like the way to start. Yeah, I like Seven Eves a lot, actually. I think Seven Eves is really good. He writes really great standalones, you know, and I'm a big sucker for standalones too. I think,
I am as well. I would like to read more standalones, especially because since now I'm doing a lot of reading blogs. It's not like I'm doing Witchwood Crown right now, which is like book 4 in the Ostenard series by Tad Williams, and it is a little harder to do like a vlog type deal, spoiler free, without mentioning names and all these things. So for me, standalones right now are at a premium. Plus, I have enough ongoing series. Like I don't necessarily need any more of those.
I plan based on your vlog to read Red Leopard, Black Wolf.
Ooh, I think you would like it. I think you would like it a lot. There is so much style in his writing. I think Marlon James is extremely talented. There's also some nods, in my opinion, to like that McCarthy Blood Meridian maximalist style. That, you know, I know Blood Meridian kind of soured on you for a little bit, but
I'm not as big of a fan as I was immediately. I put it in my top 10 early on, right after I read it. And I probably wouldn't put it in my top 10 favorite books. No, I wouldn't. There's just other better books, but I did like it a lot. You know, I was looking forward to that book for so long that I forgot about it because the African Game of Thrones thing, I remember hearing about that like a decade ago.
Yeah, it's been a
while. Like it got hyped so much. I also have to say, the thumbnail on that video of yours for Red was astounding.
Very, very good, right? It's almost like I had someone way better at this YouTube thing help me out with the thumbnail.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was you. That's right. Yes, Jared did make that thumbnail, and that's why there were cool things like contrast changes and text standing out. Because usually I just take a nice little still shot and go, and that's usually it. But I wanted it. I really actually love that vlog. It's one of the videos I feel really proud of because I loved reading that book and I got to capture it on on camera, which is cool. So I wanted to have a little extra oomph on that thumbnail, and you did provide that. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I like your vlogs. They're fun. Like they're very cozy, So
thank you, man. I love watching reading vlogs, to be honest. Like, and predominantly they're female, and predominantly they're books I don't care about. But I happen to just really like watching people work through their thoughts. I think it's fun, and as for someone who's making them, they are the most fun I've had. With filming videos, this is the most fun. The most fun I've had making videos in forever.
Yeah,
it is way less pressure. I film everything on my phone, which is cool. But also, I get to film things that aren't me talking about books. I film, trips I'm going on, or scenery, or cats. It just feels different,
I would honestly, man, I think that's great. I think that rules, and I think you should, find that fun stuff and just do it as much as possible. Like, because I think especially I think you and I've talked about this, you don't have any sort of pretensions about eventually going full time or anything. Like this is just like a fun hobby. So like, don't give a damn about like any of the metrics or whatever. Just like, did it feel fun? And did you build a cool community? Right. One of the things that I found super helpful in the like past couple of weeks is like, I just like really like my Discord server. Like I have just like kind of like cultivated a community that I just really enjoy. And I like talking to them, and they're thoughtful people, even though like they are all weirdos in their own like weird way and like all believe super
Aren't we
weird
all?
things. And exactly. But I love it. I love that server. And I'm like such a minor character in it most of the time. I pop in sometimes, but I just like talking to them, and I feel like that's a great metric, a great like sign for success. That like it just like they seem fun, like and like they're having a good time.
Yeah, and bringing people in, like I always say, 1% of your viewers will comment, and then 1% of that 1% will join something like a Patreon or a Discord server that's there. And I've always taken a lot of pride that I really love like the people who want to conversate with me and that want to be around. And I think a good way of gaining that type of community is doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I've met so many people that I consider close friends now.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
Have you ever heard of like the 1,000 like fans theory? Have you ever heard of this for like creatives on the internet?
No.
So it's a really useful way to think about stuff. Basically, this like idea put forward that if you want to be like a full-time successful creator, and you have to understand like this involves production costs for creating what you're doing, all this stuff. So the money I'm about to say does not actually equate to money in your pocket, right?
Right.
You need 1,000 fans who will give you $100 a year. And if you can do that, you can basically do anything. Right. Because that's going to pay for a lot of production stuff, and it's going to pay for all your like weird self-employed taxes, like all of these things. But what that means actually is you only need 1,000 real things. Like you only need 1,000 true believers.
Yeah. And whatever you're creating and doing. Yeah.
And it's actually really liberating to think about it like that, is to think, oh, I only need 1,000 people. And that means I should be making content that does not aim for the widest possible majority. Right. Like it doesn't have to aim for the biggest numbers. It should just be really good for the right people.
Huh.
I met with someone who was like a strategist about YouTube, who I have worked with about other stuff. Right. So we're sort of like, we're friends. And so he just like, is like, why don't we talk about this now? You're going full time. He's like, you might lose subscribers if you pivot too much, but what will happen is you'll pick up the right, like if you just do philosophy stuff from now on, you might lose people who just wanted to see you talk about, fantasy stuff, right? Or journaling, right?
Yeah.
But the point was like, you're going to lose those, but you're going to pick up the right people for you. And if you spent all of your time not if you spend all of your time pursuing the biggest numbers, what happens is actually you're kind of unappealing to everybody. Right. So you're going to be like really appealing to the right people. Connor, I say this, it's not a cult, because like you're not going to make them into like weird followers. I don't demand anyone like believes me or follows me about anything. Right. They just have to think that my writing is decent enough, or that my videos are worth helping me make. That's basically that's basically the pitch.
Yeah. And you're staying true to what you wanted to do, and you want to do it in a way that's quality that those people would be able to resonate with it, rather than saying, okay, a top 10 list of sci-fi did really well, so I need to do 80 more of these things.
Yeah, exactly. If you're pitching a startup, which I would never do, sounds awful, but like the thing that you look for, that people ask, like a venture capitalist will ask you, is what's your unfair advantage? It's like, what's the thing that you have that no one else can just like choose to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be the thing. So like for you, probably actually it's your weird history, like with like pro wrestling and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, because that had to be earned. For me, it's my PhD. It's like one of these things where it's like, oh, you're like a relatable YouTuber who has a PhD in philosophy, right? So it's like, that's like something that, sure, someone could go get that, but it's going to be 7 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can start there. So the idea is like lean into that. Also, just like make it clear who you're making content for. And for Jimmy, it might be the nut button. Connor's making a lot of good points.
Connor's always cooking, honestly.
Yeah.
And also,
man, when I finally publish my book and send it to you, if I don't get the nut button,
then you might as well just pack it up.
I'm just deleting the channel.
It's a wrap, dude. And hey, I'm a tough judge, just because we're friends doesn't mean anything. Speaking of talented people, that we've met and building communities and nut buttons and books. One of my good friends, Amanda, who has a couple of BookTube videos, I talked about with her with our Scott Baker series, just released her first book today on Amazon.
Oh, awesome.
And I wanted to give her a shout out because I know she's worked hard on it. It's called Severed Echoes, underneath the pen name Anya Dillon. And I talked about this before, and people were wondering when it was coming out and stuff like this. So to give you an update, it's out, and you should go check it out and support a new author who's already working on another project. So very cool.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. I've really loved watching her evolution, because I read a lot of writing books, like about writing, even though I don't write myself very much. And that's someone I always like send like tidbits to, because I know she's writing and she wants to be a writer. And that's not something I would have had I not been able to build a community and an outreach to people. So cheers to you, Amanda, for doing it.
Cheers to
a lot of people don't finish. So finishing is a skill.
That's true. That's true.
What I've always been told. So,
there's a saying that gets used when you're in grad school, which is that the best dissertation is done. And I think it's actually a powerful phrase for quite a few things.
Yeah. I think that there sometimes, I know it's journey before destination, but sometimes getting to that destination and sealing it is the most difficult part. And in each stage of a creative process, whatever it might be, I think needs to be thoroughly practiced. I'm good at starting things. I'm very bad at finishing.
So you mentioning journey before destination just reminded me of this quick anecdote. Sorry if we're going on a tangent. I know you have the next 2 hours planned, but okay. So when the year of Sanderson was happening, right? I got the ebooks, and I'm gonna say I read one of them. I only read Tress, and then I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like these, and I just stopped reading them. But someone's box of stuff got delivered to me, and it was like in my old apartment complex, and I knew I could find their apartment. It was just like just down the hall. But it was like an expensive box, so I wrote them a note that said, was like, hey, your box is here, but I recognized it was from like Dragonsteel, so I wrote Journey Before Destination, right? And I like just like kind of like hey man, I'm one of you, right? Then I found out after reading the books I'm not one of the, like but I did this. He comes to my door, knocks on it, and he's like, hey, do you have my box? I'm like, yeah, here you go. He takes me, he's like, thanks, and just walks away. So I thought I was gonna like strike up this friendship or something.
So there wasn't the book wasn't the only disappointment.
Exactly. People talk about how it's like really hard to make friends in your 30s, and they're absolutely right.
No, they're so right, because I'm not young enough to be cool, and I'm not old enough to be jaded. Well, I'm kind of jaded, but I'm not jaded enough. I'm still not in the world's worst camp yet. I was just talking to my my wife today, Kelsey. We were talking about changes we've seen in people who are a little bit older in our lives, and that many of the people who are older in my life have become a bit doomsday. They're very into we don't know how it's going to work, and I'm like, well, you don't have to worry about it, because you're not going to be here. You're going to be dead, so you don't have to worry about it. But there is something about that where I think it's hard to leave life. I think it's hard to leave life and imagine that things are going to be better once you're gone.
I the other night, I'm sorry to do this to you, because
go for it.
When this I had a dream about this conversation, and in it you were like moping about how you hate yourself.
I do.
And then I said this line that I knew I wanted to tell you, which was, Jimmy, the only person in the world who doesn't like you is you.
That's a beautiful thing to say, Jared. That's a beautiful thing.
And since you brought this up, I felt like I had to. I felt like it was
some Dreamcatcher Stephen King shit. I like it. I'm literally reading his new collection.
Like the only person who does not find you charming and compelling is you. So
I would agree with that. I'm sick of myself, dude. I talk too much. I've been saying this for a while now. Kev says One Piece fans would disagree.
Good point. Dude, the only time I've ever gotten a response video, the only time I've ever gotten a video where someone was like, Jared is wrong about something, was my One Piece video.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
They do not like dissenting opinions.
And the thing is, though, the crazy thing is, I was like such a fan of the show. Actually, I liked
loved it.
Live series. And so I was like, and there were two kinds of criticisms that got raised, and I agree with both of them, actually. And one day I'm going to make a much longer One Piece and philosophy video, I think, once I get caught up on the manga. Mm-hmm. One of them was actually a lot of the things Jared says he likes about One Piece is just true about shonen, right? And I was like, oh, okay, I think actually that's fair. I'm not as familiar with I used to read Shonen Jump when I was a kid, where they put out monthly ones in the US and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm not nearly as familiar as I used to be. So I get it. Like I agree with that. The other one was that I should have finished the manga first. And I just think like it just would have been a different video at that point, right? I did it about the show. Let's be real. I was catching that algorithm, man. That wave was about to crest.
And the show was good.
The show was good. Exactly. It was about the show, and I liked the show. And it got me to read the manga again. So like that's actually the sign of a great adaptation, right? Yeah, I mean, it's the only time that there was anybody who wanted to like make a video. It was very funny because the video was kind of mean, and it was like making fun of me in a lot of weird ways. And then I responded in the comments, and I just wrote, I don't agree with all of your points, but I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video and comment on it. And suddenly in the comments, he was like, oh, Jared, it's so great to hear from you. I hope you know I was just kidding around. Which was such a funny experience, because I was like, you were trying to be mean, man. I get it. You were trying to be mean because you thought it would work. But
and maybe in reality, it was just wanting a connection.
Yeah. I think that's actually a huge part of it. A lot of why people are mean, and especially when you get to a certain number of subscribers, people start viewing you as like the big channel or whatever, and don't think about you as the guy who 30 minutes before he was doing this was like changing his son's diaper or something, right? Like, they don't think about
the human aspect of it. Or I think they feel like there's some sort of like perceived objectivity about someone who has like a large amount of subscribers putting out something, and they feel like they have to correct this thing.
Yeah.
That they may or may not be getting. And, I do think that there are people who have confirmation bias based on their popularity. That is a very real thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And maybe the worst thing about social media in general, there's plenty of things I don't like about social media, but that's one of the things I see on YouTube a lot of times, especially in subjective creative opinions, that, my opinion is worth more.
Sorry. They're not subjective. There are people who are wrong about fiction and stuff. I want to be, this is where me and Stevie D are like, locked in. we are right. We just happen to disagree about what the truth is. Yeah.
Well, you guys disagree on what is actually objective then.
Yeah. We both admit that there is an objective answer. We just both happen to think we've sort of tuned into it.
So then, isn't that in its nature subjective then?
No. Some people can just be wrong. Like, right? Just like the possibility of error does not mean that there's no objectivity there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I believe in some objectivity when it comes to like what is the story about, who, like, what methods are used to tell the story and such. But it's going to be a tricky thing to get me to agree that there's objective like opinions about quality. It's going to be a rough road.
Because it just, man, the crucial issue is just, do you think it's possible, like even coherent at first, to say that some art is just better than others, right?
For my personal taste, yeah, for my taste. I think.
See, yeah. I want to say over and above your taste. Do you think this sentence makes sense? Okay. The sentence would just be, I know this is bad, but I like it. Because if you think that makes sense, then you're admitting that there's like some standard.
No. I actually don't agree. I don't agree. And I'll tell you why. Because I think that is a defense mechanism from people who have been shamed by people who think that there's something objective.
Oh, no. Yeah. Okay. So let's admit that sometime, man, we're doing real philosophy now. This is,
no.
But let's admit that some people will use it as a defense mechanism. It's a hedge, right? It's a way to fend off criticism. But imagine like someone who's been like, they've dedicated their life to enjoying and really evaluating the great works of literature, right? Actually, Steve Donahue is someone like this, knows this stuff front and back, but he's like, it's garbage, but I love the novel Meg about a giant killer shark. like he loves it, and he'll admit that it's garbage, right? But it just brings him a certain amount of pleasure. Because like, I know that there are often many books that bring me almost no pleasure, especially while reading them, that I think are objectively the best books, or the best books that I've read. And it had nothing to do with my assessment of them in the moment. And the next move you're going to make is like, oh, you didn't enjoy them in the moment. The pleasure was just kind of like forestalled. So it's like, oh, you got to, the pleasure comes later as you evaluate your having readness of them. But I think that ends up being like, we always go looking for like the missing pleasure, basically, in this kind of analysis. But like, it's like, look, I don't know. It just seems obvious to me that Dostoevsky is better than Brandon Sanderson. Like this, like it just seems like there's just the truth of the matter about these.
But I don't think I agree. And how do you reconcile when two objective, well-read, legendary critics disagree?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when two scientists disagree, right? We need to go looking for further evidence. Yeah.
I don't think it is. I don't think anyone's pulling out the telescope and finding molecules in blood meridian. I don't think that's happening. I don't think that that's the same thing at all.
It's a very deep book, Jimmy, actually. So if you
to get to the layers, you really got to look deep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think there's something to this. I need to walk away for just a moment, so you can just riff with the audience about how dumb I am for a second.
All right.
I'll be
right
back.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think some news.
Some news. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Jared is wrong. I am right, and that is the objective critique of this conversation. I've looked into this topic quite a bit, and I've watched videos from like iWizard and other people, and I've yet to ever be compelled away from my belief. But I'm dumb, so what do I know, right? Because I probably cannot have as an objective opinion as someone who's as well read as like a Harold Bloom or something. Also, I feel like a lot of people who frame the objective argument is like, you can like whatever you like. That's fine. They say it's fine. But then you watch them interact with other human beings and they act as if they don't act like that. They want to make sure that you're beneath them for liking the stupid thing that they have decided to do. I don't know. I'm yet to be convinced. Now, that's not to say that someone who has studied narrative or like is into that and way more educated, I'm not saying that their opinion doesn't hold more weight or doesn't have they have the opportunity to pull out things that you would never think of. Like I look at writing a lot, and I will point out things about writing that I think is really good, but like I've had people stare back at me and go, I don't care. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I was just refuting all your claims. No, I was explaining further my stance, and I was talking about how
I could hear you. I left my headphones in the whole
Oh,
time.
beautiful. Did you hear the part where I said I was objectively right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. You were accompanying me as I was peeing, but like,
oh, wonderful. Did everything come out okay? Healthy stream?
Yeah. But it momentarily interrupted when you said that.
Yeah.
Good God.
That's how you get a UTI.
Yeah. Good point.
You got to be careful.
That's on you, man. I'm sending you the medical bill. If you want to, if you want to Venmo me some money for some cranberry juice, I got to run. So,
does that really work?
I actually heard it makes it worse. So,
of course it did.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We had a question earlier, and I have a couple highlights. If you ask questions earlier, I'm going to try to get to everything, and hopefully I didn't miss stuff. I think this kind of goes into like we're talking about like it's bad, but I like it. So the question's for you. It says, are you still able to enjoy good old pew pew, the alien sci-fi, the sci-fi without much philosophy?
Yeah, I am. I liked. I'm gonna choose like one that makes me sound pretentious at first, but it was A Princess of Mars, like the John Carter novels, which are sort of classic, sort of like Sword and Planet stuff. But it's literally like a Confederate soldier. That's part of the detail we overlook most of the time when we talk about this book now. But gets transported to Mars and then just like starts, and because like Earth is got higher gravity or whatever, he's like freakishly strong and can just like he can defeat all of the men and take all of the women. Like that's basically those, and like those books are like fun in their own way. I'm trying to think of other. I want to say I liked Red Rising, but I never finished the third book. I just kind of like lost interest at some point. But I remember the first book. It's very reduct. It's like very what do you call it? It's very, very clear like what kind of book it wants to be based on like other books that have come out in the past. But I thought it was like fun, right? I had a really fun time reading it, so I can enjoy them, So I do think I can enjoy those. I'd have to look back and see which ones I've done most like lately. And I want to say like actually my view about like what things are objectively good is not that like the more philosophical it is, the better. Like some of those books suck. Even if like they have good ideas, but there are good action adventure books that have actually like properly they pull it off. It's well executed. And they actually have theme, which a lot of those books do not have. This is one of the big problems. Okay, Evie's saying Tchaikovsky, but like I mean the last one I read of Tchaikovsky was Children of Time. And it's I don't know. It's fun to think of it. Yeah, they are action driven plots, but he's like doing such weird things with them. I haven't read other Tchaikovsky though, so maybe his other books aren't as like dense or something. But
I mean, I did like Children of Time quite a bit.
I liked it too. I
thought it was good. Now, Red Rising is actually a really interesting one because you're like the first book is so much different than the rest of the series. I've not read the sequels, but I've pretty much unanimously heard that they're better than the first ones. But this is a story that is a lot of thrills and kills, but slowly does start to like build this theme with a ton of nuance about classism and overthrowing a ruler. Like, what does that look like? How ethical is this? Like, there's a lot to that story. So I think that if people are willing to give something like that a chance, like you give it room to grow and to breathe, especially in a series, obviously, you have the opportunity to go somewhere really interesting. I think this also happens in A Song of Ice and Fire too. It goes from a murder mystery to identity crisis, essentially.
I was thinking about this the other day because it was a comment that you made in a video that like really stuck because I don't know, guys. I don't watch a lot of booktubers. I don't watch every video by them. I watch every single Jimmy video. And you said something like you said A Song of Ice and Fire is like a low fantasy setting, and it just got me thinking about like what low fantasy would mean. And I think like the thing I loved about A Song of Ice and Fire is that like magic in like the first book just like doesn't exist. Or if it does, it's like very, and then suddenly you see maybe when they're across the sea, but like there's someone like a sorcerer like conjuring like a ladder or something like in the street. Like there's this moment. The image might be totally fabricated in my head, but like there's some kind of magic thing happening, right? And it's like a
Yes.
show that's going on, and it was like, oh, there's magic in this world. Like, you know, it just like it like shows up so gradually in a way that I think is so good. I mean, I will not reread the Martin books until another book comes out. That's basically when I would possibly reread them, but they were so fun for precisely that reason. I love the way the magic grows as you get deeper into the story. It becomes weirder in a lot of ways. It's good. Martin's
You're
good.
100% right, because the contrast to the genre at the time is a lot of stories about magic leaving the world. We are now in a world where magic left and now it's coming back, and it's all signified by this red meteor that goes across the sky, which is used as a symbol to drive prophecy by many different people. I mean, you have Daenerys, obviously, with the dragons being born. You have Stannis and Melisandre looking at the comet for this reason. Also, during this time, you see Bran be paralyzed and then be visited by a three-eyed raven or a three-eyed crow. And so I love that, like this meteor. And this is also historically, like people looked at meteors as signs of reasons things happened or whatever. And it's not just meteors, but also eclipses and whatever else. So that's kind of neat as well. It's just like a human thing to do, but magic is re-entering the world. And what does that look like for people who are completely, you know, I guess we call it like atheistic or agnostic about magic. You know, people are laughing at the maesters who have these books in the Citadel of like dragons and everything else. You know, they don't believe these things, even though
this reminds me of something I really dislike about Stormlight Archive.
Okay, just going after the Sanderson fans. All right,
which is that so Yasna is like famously like an atheist, right? Or she's like very much does not believe in like the creator or whatever.
Yes,
and then you find out that like these like honor existed, right? And then it's like mentioned in a later book, and it's like, well, she's like, well, that's not really what we meant by God, right? And I remember just thinking, like, okay, sure, she has like this grander philosophical notion of like what God is, cool,
yes,
but a major foundational belief for her just got disconfirmed, and I feel like she should have gone through a bigger identity crisis.
I agree with you because a lot of people, like I consider myself an atheist, a lot of like what people will say if they're atheistic is that, or atheist, I don't keep saying atheistic. Anyways, is that I would just like to see a sign. I would like to see, like, if you like, I'm willing to reverse this course if you were to show. And she actually does.
Very, very open-minded, right? But then I felt like and I kind of understand like what would happen. There's lots of ways it could go, and I also could see where Yasna is going to be like a bigger plot in like the second half of the Stormlight Archive. So like maybe that'll come up or something. But I just feel like it was a real character development moment where like literally at some point Yasna enters into I'm sorry guys for spoilers, enters into a romantic relationship with a man who killed God. I feel like this should have been a bigger deal.
I'll attempt to play devil's advocate for a second. Okay. I think there are people watching this that will hear that I said that I don't believe in religion or whatever, and they'll say, "Well, you have evidence every single day of like, you know, supernatural." You know what I mean? So maybe in Stormlight's reality with Spren and all of these things, maybe that is the same as being like, well, there's a historical Jesus and then there's the you know what I mean? Like maybe that's for them.
Yeah. I would at least like to see Yasna work through the thoughts, right? Like you know, take 2 of the Kaladin depression chapters and let her have a conversation.
Well, and this is the difficulty of having a very big series of various POVs, like where like different things are going to resonate with different people. So Yasna is someone that resonates with me. I like Yasna quite a bit, even though I'm pretty sure I know where that character is going, and it'll probably annoy me a little bit. But we don't get as much time, unfortunately, you know, and that is the trouble of multiple POVs for people. So Brandsell Book says you can't really possibly represent atheism in a very good way in a setting like the Cosmere, because Cosmere has so many gods or pieces of god shards that it doesn't make nearly as much sense. So I think that it's like my point is like what they accept is like their reality is different, but I know what you're saying, and I think it's a pretty good argument against it. I'll tell you what does really, really great with Belief in Doubt is The Second Apocalypse by R. Scott Baker.
Oh, interesting.
which I think would be fascinating to hear you read through, because Baker has he did not do his dissertation. He actually basically bailed out in the middle of his philosophy PhD, from what I understand, being
It's actually usually the smart decision.
apparently he really fell down a rabbit hole of determinism, and like it killed his entire will to find the truth of philosophy. And I think it affected him I was talking to my friend Oso about this today, but like, I think it affected him in many ways, like many ways. And his whole series is kind of about that. And it's a little bit of Dune, you know, it's a little bit of Lord of the Rings. It's a little bit of Blood Meridian.
Is it scary? Like, is it like,
it's dark? It's dark.
Okay.
And yeah, there are some times where I feel like it borders on that cosmic horror almost. But it's beautifully written.
I don't like a lot of horror. I like Hyperion, so I can handle some of it.
You'll be like,
I probably wouldn't read a Stephen King book just because I don't enjoy horror, and it makes me feel like a scared little child.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm reading King's new collection, and there's some creepy stories in there. I'm so happy. It's good.
Yeah,
it's very good.
Because I think for a long time he just like wasn't writing horror, right?
He was doing a lot of crime. Like that was kind of, you know, he really was wanting to do that. And I actually liked Later. I thought that was a good book too.
I mean, like, I feel like King might be kind of an example. I don't know this super well, but he kind of strikes me as an example of like, have you seen the fact that Rick Astley is like posting on the internet a lot lately? And he's like he's like posting just like updates, and he'll sing stuff. But apparently, like every show he'll do Never Gonna Give You Up, right? He's gonna do the song every single time. And like, you just kind of have to accept, dude, like you are the Never Gonna Give Me Up guy.
Yes.
Like you are that guy. Or you know, I'm trying to think of, you know, some random like 80s hair metal band or whatever that had one hit song, but like that should be like, that would be the song you go to the show. If they don't play it because like they're
Don't
like, no,
Stop
you gotta
Believing
hear the new stuff.
by Journey.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Journey fans are gonna tell you they had a lot of other good songs.
I understand.
Name 3.
But they're playing that one no matter what.
Right? Exactly. Play it every time. And I feel like with a collection of stories, King, there should be a few horror stories. Like, you know, there's gonna be 7 stories. 2 should be horror. Like,
I would agree with that. I think I'm glad that that's where he went. I've also heard that the afterword is really, really interesting for his time in life. And one thing I can tell you, 3 or 4 stories in now, it's definitely circling around people who are older. And I feel that he's talking a little bit through these characters at the end of their lives. And it's kind of heavy because of that, because King is getting so old. But I'm delighted that it's actually 1, good, and 2, kind of creepy. So that's cool.
Awesome.
But
hey, I just saw Fantasy Awash popped in and say hi. I'm gonna say I really liked your beginner Greek history stuff. That was good.
Yeah, Laura is a scholar as well, and knows tons about religion and many other things. And I always enjoy talking to her. I'm actually getting lunch with her tomorrow. We're going to get Indian food at noon. So,
Laura, I'm just going to make one small correction. It's just really tiny. You said the sentence that said Socrates didn't write much down. He wrote nothing down. We should just, let's be extra clear. But no, I get it. I like the video, and I thought it was really good.
Hey, it might have taken a takeout order, right, from the snack shack. You might have just,
exactly.
You know, goat no cheese or something. You know,
exactly.
Lactose, gluten free, something.
Exactly.
But talking about like faith and doubt and stuff in a fantasy world, I think R. Scott Baker does a really amazing job of his 2 series. He has a trilogy, and then he has a 4-book series, quartet. And what he does in it is the first trilogy explains doubt, and then the second installment is all about belief, and both are terrifying. That's the interesting thing. Like he really shows the downsides of both. And also, I would say maybe a healthy dose in some ways, because like not all things are bad with the belief either. There's like, you know, I can't explain without spoilers, but I would love to see you read through that series. 1, I think the prose you would very much enjoy. Very biblical, Book of Judges kind of deal.
Nice.
But
that's the gruesome book, man. That's the book with all the gnarly stories that that everyone forgets about.
I read Judges a lot. I like, you know, and then, you know, I like the way it's written. You know, whose depiction of divinity I liked is actually Erickson's in Malazan.
Now I've only read 2 of the books. I've only read the first 2. I'm gonna get to Memories of Ice. I keep getting like 3 chapters in and then deciding to read something else.
Yeah, the first half slow.
Yeah, Laura, I see this. You're being general. I get it. I just had to give you a hard time, but I like the video. I really mean that. So
You
I
should have
watched
pushed
it.
up your glasses when you did it.
Yeah.
You should have said, actually.
Yeah. Oh my. Okay, hold on. We'll get to Malaz in a second. In college, I was like I was a musician.
Mhm.
I did a lot of like singer songwritery stuff. It was the early 2000s. We were all dumb, but and one of the things my friends used to make fun of me for was that dramatic moments in songs I would push up my glasses. And it's usually because at some point they'd fallen down and it would be this, but they thought it was like a dramatic thing. I was like, this is like the most anime villain moment
Yes, it is.
that I'm putting in.
You could be an anime villain.
Yeah, I guess it. Yeah. But with Erickson and stuff, I think his depiction of divinity is really great because the gods are people you don't want to mess with, or the gods of these entities that it would actually most of the time would be better if they ignored you. And then there are those who are like, but wait, if we play our cards right, definitely it could really work, right? So they become priests, they become and then but oftentimes it goes really horribly wrong, which has a very kind of ancient conception, right? Because like the idea that like God in each of it is someone who likes you is a kind of late innovation in the history of thinking about God. Most people were like, oh no, these are like really powerful beings and they could destroy us.
Yeah, you don't want to be Job.
And Malazan picks that up, or Malazan, whatever you're supposed to say these days. But kids these days, man, they're always telling me
I swear.
But
phones.
But I think it depicts them super well, like really, really well in that regard. And it's one thing I really appreciate about it. I don't know when I'll finish that series. Frankly, it's literally like a matter of this is great. Like I'm like the happiest I've probably been in ages doing this full time now. I have no time. Like I cannot give up an hour. Like like I like so like it's good that I make content about things that I like because the reading then contributes to it. But man, like I don't think I could make Malazan content or something. So I probably have to like really dedicate 20 minutes a day or something to reading Malazan, which is not how you feel good about reading that series, actually.
That's true. That is true. And I think you'll probably have more time as you get processes down and you're going to get into a rhythm.
Exactly. I'm sort of just treating the next 3 months as like hardcore crunch mode,
Yeah. And you should. I mean, you got to go for it and you got to get it going. One of the things I want to talk about divinity and Malazan that I really enjoyed is also that divinity wasn't always a choice for the person who was divine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that people can just band together and bring someone to divination, even if they did not want or divinity, because they didn't even want it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I've gotten to a bunch of that stuff, but I will see it all at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a ton more to go to the gods stuff, and
I will say this is one thing I do like about Sanderson. To go back to him for a second, is that the people who sort of they get the shards and they whatever capitalized word they are now, it's not often not good for them long term, right? It ends up kind of being awful, and I think that's like an interesting thing to play with. So I do think there is some nuance or some like interesting choices Sanderson makes there. And so, props, credit there. I don't know if I have much other good things to say lately. The more I think about Sanderson, like the less I like him, but like, I'll at least give him that one.
Yeah. I'm glad that you were able to at least fit in one compliment towards the man.
Last time you tried to get me to compliment the Name of the Wind.
I did. And you failed miserably.
Yeah.
Not very objective of you, Jared. Yeah. I'm just saying it felt very subjective.
It was hard for me to leave the bounds of objectivity and find a lie to tell about the name of it.
So I was trolling through your community post, by the way, and we're talking. Obviously, you're a fan of sci-fi and fantasy, but your channel has a lot to do with philosophy. And you did a poll, and you were like, "What's your favorite genre?" And I think you included so it was philosophy, science fiction, fantasy, and there was classics, and maybe one other thing there.
I think the fourth one was just something else. Like,
fantasy and sci-fi won. Were you shocked by that?
No, not really. Not really. Because I found that people who like classics will at least sometimes like science fiction and fantasy, right? So you'll find these like mixed readers. And then there are people who would like, I only read science fiction and fantasy.
Yes.
And so there's just like those different groupings, and philosophy is like the narrowest of them. Right. So that wasn't going to win. I thought something else might win, that fourth one. And I think, by the way, if you ever do a poll, a community post, always add like a fourth or tell me in the comments thing. That's the hack, right?
Oh, is that the hack?
Because that's how people will, tell you things. But and boost engagement. But that was a 2-beer tip. So
2-beer tip. I like it.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. But honestly, if you look at my channel, the videos that have done really well are like journaling things that I don't do anymore. Like I'm just like done with those. And so the people who watch for the journaling stuff, they're not here to talk about what books they want to read.
Right. Yes.
And so they're not going to answer. And then so Evie has asked, what's the 3-beer tip going to be? We can only see once the 3rd beer has been consumed. That's the thing. You never know.
Don't use Indeed. That's what it's going to be.
Man. Okay. So when I got laid up, so I worked at Indeed, worked at a big, the site that says we help people get jobs. I have a t-shirt that says that. And I got laid off from this place, and I posted that video, and I hadn't lost access to company Slack yet. I'd had it for one more day. And I got a ton of messages from people who were like, I didn't know we worked together, but I've been watching your videos for months.
That is weird.
Yeah. And the funny part is that partly when I started getting bigger on YouTube, I changed my Slack profile to a picture of Bobby Hill. So that people wouldn't know that it was me.
God damn it, Bobby.
and so I changed it to that, so no one knew. And so I got a few that were like, are you the Jared Henderson who just posted this video? And it was like,
actually, I am.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, thanks for subscribing. Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That is kind of surreal in some ways.
Yeah.
How many views does that video have now? Because I feel like that's 97,000. So I mean, a lot of people saw this,
and a lot of it happened in like the first 3 days. It really tapered off. Like it caught my core audience and then just like went way down.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are interested,
which is what I expected, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are interested in that though, because like layoffs are a thing that are happening,
But also, man, I have to like fight the urge now. And my next video was totally not clickbait. So I think I've successfully fought the urge. For the first 3 hours, I had a 20% click-through rate on that video.
That's crazy.
So for those who don't do the people who don't do YouTube from the inside, YouTube will tell you how many people click through it based on the impressions you receive. And channels vary a lot. If I get 10%, that's amazing. If I get 6 or 7% early on, I'm like, I feel good. My latest video, which has about 40,000 views in a little under 2 weeks, is like at like 3.7. And I expected it. It's like a long-term video. That's fine.
Yeah.
That video was like 20%. So that meant 20% of the people who saw it the first time clicked on it. Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably are, maybe feeling their own doom or can relate or have the fear. You know what I mean? Because like,
but now you totally see why people cave into the clickbait, right?
Yeah.
They see like how well it works. Like,
yeah, there's just no lasting.
It sucks that it works. It totally sucks that it works. Yeah.
It does suck. If you start with a title with 90% chance it's going to be a banger.
Yeah. And the funny part is that title was not my title. That was not the one I wanted. And like I was talking to some other creator friends and I was like, look, I need to post this. And to be totally frank, I needed to post it to see if people would sign up to Substack to see if I could get a consistent income again. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. Evie, yes, that's correct. It's like when it pops up and you're recommended, that's what they're measuring.
Like how many people will actually click on.
And I was like, I just need people to click on this so the message can get out. And someone was like, just call it "So I Just Got Fired" and put a comma there. And I was like, okay. And I put it and it totally worked. It totally worked.
I mean, I saw it and deeply inhaled. My wife was sleeping next to me. She's like, what? And I'm like, he just bought a house and he just got fired. Like I was panicked for you, dude. I really was. Bart's Booksbait. Bart, how you doing, bud? He said, Jared getting fired was the best thing that happened to YouTube, BookTube. I'm enjoying this. Yes, I only brought Jared on because he was fired. Actually, I don't interview employed people. That's
I've actually been working on getting Alan. I've been writing letters every day to his school just so he can be on more often.
I'm constantly just pushing like No Child Left Behind. Like I'm just trying to get Alan to the point where he does quit. Because I feel like it would make him happy.
Teacher spills all about Gen Alpha, whatever, blah, blah, something.
Alan
like
should construct a course and say, keep your kids home. I'll teach them through YouTube. I think that totally would be a trend setting thing. There are teacher vlog. I didn't know this. My friend Bees told me about this. There's teachers that vlog their entire like days and stuff. And I said, if Alan did that,
it's weird.
Alan would get fired if he did that because he would be hitting the kids with foam swords and tennis balls and stuff.
Yeah,
like
you don't want to document this. You don't want evidence.
No, you do not want this documented.
Get the cases right. See, worse them through their declensions for Latin. So yeah.
I'm just thinking about him falling off the cart and shattering his collarbone and how he could have looped that, in the first 30 seconds of the video. And be like, how I got here. It would have been fun.
Cut to the camera. So you might be wondering.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
It's a real Saved by the Bell moment.
Yeah, shirt off, arm in sling, all that yellow bruising he had. I feel like that would just be, it would be fantastic. Yeah. So clearly your audience loves philosophy. They love science fiction and fantasy, at least some of them. And you're going to be doing a video on the philosophy of Tolkien. Right.
This
is something that's on your mind. You read a book about it. What's your approach to this video that's coming up? Obviously, you don't want to give away too much, but I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I'm working on a video on the philosophy of Tolkien. I don't know when it'll be out. It could be months, right? The trick is to have lots of videos kind of in production at all times. Yeah. Right. But and I think there's a couple of themes I want to extract, right? This isn't going to be like a comprehensive, like total, like, because that could be a 20-hour course or something, and I'm not going to make that. But I think there's a few things I want to bring up. One of them is I think there's a topic in philosophy that in the ancient world was like a big deal, but no one talks about these days at like any length. And it's about friendship. Like, what is it to be like a true friend? And I think Tolkien actually gives us some of like the best depictions of friendship. Actually, like I think the Samwise and Frodo stuff is really powerful to think about, like what friendship looks like. There's other stuff though about the relationship between like myth and truth. It comes in the Silmarillion. Why is it that Tolkien will often report the same facts in multiple different ways across the legendarium? Well, it's because like they're all being sort of mythically retold, and we should ask. And I've started reading through his letters about like things that he would say about the relationship between myth and then like as some kind of deeper truth being revealed through the myth. All right. So like, that's really interesting. And then there's this third topic I want to address, which is a kind of infamous essay from Michael Moorcock. Do you know the essay?
Epic Poo.
Epic Poo. So Moorcock has this idea that Tolkien is basically responsible for all of the bad stuff in the world. Right. I think that's like that is like the way to describe Moorcock's view.
There's a disdain.
Yeah, exactly. Like your milk was spoiled in your fridge. That was Tolkien's fault. Someone kicked your dog. Tolkien did that. And the thing is that that's a good one. A lot of people though dismiss the essay, right? They're like, it was just Moorcock being an asshole. And okay, he was being an asshole, right? Let's admit that. Does he make any interesting points? And basically what he accuses Tolkien of is being a fascist. And the question is that true? The answer to that is no. But there's another question, which is like, is there something in the vicinity which is actually interesting to talk about with Tolkien? And the answer to that is yes. There is something interesting there, which is about Tolkien's nostalgia for the past. Right?
Yes.
Which can politically be coded as a very reactionary kind of thing, but doesn't have to be. So let's talk about what that means. And that's what I want to talk about at length in that video. Is like, what does it mean to be the kind of writer that Tolkien is in like a post World War II world. And I think that's the interesting, because like China Miéville, who is like the farthest left writer that I know of, like he is like, the dude's a communist. Like the dude is like full blown a communist.
Yes.
And he's like, I agree with Michael Moorcock. And then like people got mad at him and they were like, he's like, well, I kind of agree with Michael. Like he walked it back a little. He walked it back a little bit. But I feel like we should like actually talk through like what was meant, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't do like a ton of political content in my on my channel, and I don't want to start being like a political YouTuber, in part because like my views about lots of things don't map on clearly to a lot of like tribalistic sides in a way that would make it easier for me to succeed. That's like one
especially on the internet. Yeah, especially
another part of it is that, like, I think talking about politics too much is like
soul zapping.
Exactly. It's bad for the soul. It genuinely is. And I think it's like the big American vice actually is to talk about national politics all the time. Like that's like what we love to do.
Yeah, it's very much American thing.
And I don't want to do that all the time. And in my personal life, I might think about it, but I don't need to bring it to the channel. But I think talking about those deeper philosophical themes actually is pretty interesting. And like I have a first edition of the volume where that was public, where it was reprinted, the Epic Poo thing. It's in Wizards and something. But I bought it actually in an auction that Bridger did on Whatnot.
I bought stuff.
So
from that too.
I have like a first edition from that, and so I want to show that off a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very, very interesting video. I think it'll be kind of fun to go through that. And I do think the context of when he was writing these things and forming these opinions does matter. I mean, World War 1 or 2. Me and Kelsey were talking today when we walked to get coffee, and I was talking about, how the end of times is a very profitable thing, and making people believe that the end of times is near is one of the best grifts of all time.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I said the only time where I think you could be convinced that may have been happening in modern times. And I'm sure someone else is probably going to chime in a great example. But for me, I think of like World War 1 and 2, or seeing hundreds of millions of people die. And especially World War 2, whenever you see, not the Nazis taking over Europe, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is the Antichrist or whatever other apocalyptic figure you would like to use. But I think
it's either Key or Kai. It's Kei, but he's like, Moorcock's also an anarchist, and I have a lot of love for a lot of anarchists. Like Ursula K. Le Guin is so huge for me. I have a lot of anarchist books on my shelf. One day I'm going to do a bookshelf tour of the stuff back here, like the stuff that makes it into the office. And but you'll see, I have a lot of like anarchist books back there, so I get it. I totally get it. I just feel like we need to work through what all the words mean. That's like kind of my philosophical background coming back. Like if you want to be angry and call someone a fascist, why don't we take 5 minutes to actually figure out what fascism means and then see if it applies, and then talk about the complications? Like, wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah. So. And also, what did that mean in that time compared to now?
Exactly. Because like Tolkien didn't fight in World War II, but he fought in World War One. And like he killed a lot of the Kaiser's men, or at least we might imagine that he did. And so like, I don't know, if you told him he was a fascist, you might go like,
might be throwing
hands. Exactly.
He has some stake in the game, I would say.
Exactly.
So I think it's interesting to think about these type of things, and like obviously the labels we put on people, but also considering the time difference. Almost 100 years ago at this point, 85 years, 87 years since The Hobbit was written. I think there's been a lot to change, but we have history to go back and read that can kind of contextualize some of the stuff that Epic Poo's talking about. I think Epic Poo does bring up like a lot of really good issues with the classism. For instance, like we're talking about Sam and Frodo being friends, but there's also a power hierarchy there. That's
Sam is his servant, right? Like Sam is his servant. What I think part of it shows is that actually it is possible to transcend those class boundaries. It is possible, but it takes an enormous amount of virtue on both people's parts. Right. It takes it has to be both. You have to have a very forgiving servant and a very sort of earnest and loving like employer, right? In this regard, for it to even be possible. Right. Because we see in the Shire, a bunch of people who want bag end who are not virtuous. What would it be like if the Saxville Bagginses, get bag end and then get to employ Samwise and the old gaffer, right?
Yeah.
They'd be terrible. They would be terrible. And it shows actually the precarity of those kinds of there's so much to be said here, Joe. There's so much.
No, I know. And I mean, we could also just go the obvious route, which maybe you cannot be virtuous and have a servant.
Exactly.
I think I'm probably a believer of that.
This is one I would bring up. For instance, this is a thing from Frederick Douglass that actually comes up that I love. This is an example I love. I mentioned on my Substack recently. Go and subscribe, jaredhenderson.substack. But it was about at one point Frederick Douglass was transferred to like another master temporarily. He was still owned by someone, but he like went to a cousin, right? And he meets the cousin's wife, and the cousin's wife, his name's Sophia, is super lovely, and he describes her almost like in angelic terms, right? And she wants to teach him how to read, and she wants to be kind. And even though he's going to be a servant to her son, she basically treats him like a member of like an extended family, right? Within a year, completely changes, and she's more vicious than the old master. And he uses this actually as like a kind of pity. He's like, how terrible the institution of slavery is that it turned a great woman into a monster.
Wow.
Which actually takes an enormous amount of virtue on his part to be able to say it, like an enormous amount of forgiveness already, but he's willing to say that.
That's
right.
Powerful.
And I think, and it's one of my favorite parts of it, because he's like, I was the victim because I was being beaten, and he won't ever say he wasn't the victim. He absolutely was. But she was also the victim because her soul was destroyed. My soul wasn't destroyed. Right. Wow. Like that's the difference. And like, that's why I think like that example is so powerful.
That speaks to like the system of Bag End and the Shire and Sam coming back from this amazing adventure and saving Frodo, and then just kind of going back to the status quo and not questioning the way things are structured. That is something that people pick on. I think Moorcock was pretty opposed to this idea as well. And there's stuff there. And, people will hear this and be like, oh, like, Tolkien is the man. You can't say these things. But I think it's actually really compelling conversation. I think
if his work is good, which it is, if his work is good, it can sustain a prolonged critical conversation. That's the point. And that's the point I'll make in the video, right? Great works do not exist only to be praised. They exist there to be critically discussed. Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance that you could just cancel everything you've been working on and make that video for me? Because I would like to watch this video.
Yeah. You pay my mortgage next month, and I'll do it.
Well, you're what interest rate you on? 5.9?
Dude, I signed a mortgage 2 weeks ago, so it's like a 6.7, man. Like that's like
I can't cover.
That's like what you get, and I have like amazing credit.
You don't have not amazing credit with those glasses. Are you kidding me?
They only give this to you
if you're above 750.
Exactly, man. Right before I applied for a mortgage, I cracked 800.
Beautiful.
And I still am at like a 6.7 or whatever.
Yeah. That is beautiful. I commend you, sir. That is something that definitely helps out.
Yeah.
There were two
things that got mentioned here that I want to bring up. One is Bransell asked like, what Douglass work was that? That's from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. It's kind of his first book. Right. And so you can read it all there. Which is great. It's one of my top 10 favorite books. I know top 10s are kind of a meme or whatever, but like literally that is, if you're looking for what is great American literature, that's like at the top of the list, if not the best thing we've ever produced. Like arguably Moby Dick is the best book that America's ever produced, but still that book, astounding, absolutely astounding. And then, the other question was, if Jared wasn't on Chatting with Nuts, would he be working on that video? I wouldn't be working on the Tolkien video. I'd be wrapping up the Stoicism video so I could get around to the Tolkien video, but I would be working on it.
I mean,
the problem is that I have this view that like, which is probably stupid, and I bet a lot of other content creators don't do this, which is like, if you want to do a thing about Tolkien, you have to reread his works to do it.
I think that's a great idea. And I know that Library Ladder also follows that.
Yeah. And so I'm also working on a video. This will be less enthusiastic. I'm working on a video about Ayn Rand. And I'm going to read every Ayn Rand novel.
Are you
And
okay?
I ordered her journals from like the Ayn Rand like Institute so that I could read them for the video.
You know how many people are gonna be mad that you did that?
I know, but I'm gonna make the video because I think that if you want to hate somebody, which maybe let's say she might have deserved to be hated, you should read their works and actually understand what they said before you said they hate. Because the amount of people who are like, oh well, she sucks as a writer. I'm like, well, did you read the book? And they're like, well, I don't have to. I know that it sucks.
Yeah. Well, Jared, this is what happens when there's objective claims about something.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that is true. I think that is a great idea. I always tell people that too when people are like, "Oh, should I read this book?" And then someone's like, "Oh no, it's trash," and they're like, oh, "Okay, I'll cross the TV." I'm like, "No, go experience it." And they might be like, "Oh, you like it?" And I'm like, "No, I hate it." But like, you should go read whatever that book is. Like, you should have your own experience so that you can speak to it, especially if you want to be a part of the conversation, right? Like, you want to be able to have your own.
What is a book that you didn't enjoy but that you're glad you read? I'm sorry for asking you questions.
No,
I know
that's fine.
the other way around.
No, I actually love when people on the show ask me stuff. It's makes for the best episodes. So are you meaning in a way where it's like I legitimately didn't enjoy it, or like it was tough to read? Because those are two different things.
So, okay, I haven't read this in a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say whether or not I would like it now.
Okay.
But the one that I think it is The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne.
Okay.
I hated the book. I hated reading it. I read it in high school though. So maybe I would like it now, but I'm glad that I read it, and I actually admit that I probably lost a lot of stuff. Like
Yeah.
I didn't but another one would be Toni Morrison's Sula. The first time I read it in high school, I hated it. I read it 2 years later in college and I loved it. Right? So I'm just curious, are there books like that for you, Jimmy?
Yeah, I think Blood Meridian and Suttree fall into that. I reread Blood Meridian immediately, which everyone's going to check that off their bingo card because I always say that when I bring it up. Yeah. But I don't necessarily know if I really enjoyed it, but I could tell there was something else there, and like it bothered me, like it kind of haunted me. And Suttree more so. Suttree is a book that when I closed it, I was like, "Was that my 1-star read for the year?" And then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I'm so happy I read that book, partly because I became a McCarthy fan, and I feel like it helped me understand him more because it's autobiographical, at least in some sense. And that's a book I would like to reread actually, and see if I could enjoy it more on a reread.
Yeah. Have you read Moby Dick, by the way?
No, it's my whale. Actually, it's my white whale.
Call me Ishmael, but honestly, man, I read Moby Dick recently, and I had never read it before, and I always thought it would suck. I always thought it was awful, and it rules. It totally rules. It is clearly the best novel that the United States has ever produced and will ever produce. Like, it is so amazing. And I was thinking about how much it makes me hate modern publishing, because you can imagine that a modern editor would read Moby Dick and say, you could cut out those 7 pages about the anatomy of whales.
Yeah, we don't need this. I think we got it.
Exactly. And it would be ruthless, and it would be awful, and it would ruin the book. It would totally ruin the book.
Yeah, I know Alan loves Moby Dick, like unironically, like he really loves Moby Dick, and I've always found that fascinating.
No, this is good. Alan, excellent. This is another great Alan opinion. Yeah. I feel like I'm literally 50-50 between trash and gold for Alan. Like, when Alan says stuff, it's only one of the two, and this is going in the...
And you both feel confident in what you're saying, and that's why it would be a very entertaining debate.
I wish I had Alan's sheer confidence in every word he says. I love it, actually. It's what makes it for such a great viewing experience.
I think Alan is someone who has thought long and hard about the things that he really believes in, and he takes those and he will go to bat for them no matter what. And I appreciate that very much. Yeah. Sam put something here. He said, neither Jared or Jimmy are saying this, but some critics say if you think Lord of the Rings would be better if it ended with all the hobbits setting up a pseudo-socialist state, then you miss the point. I think that's pretty in direct opposition of Tolkien's visions, right? So
yeah, he is a man he is a literal like old school monarchist. He believes that like the best form of government, I think, is like a true and just king. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not we've had one in a long time or whatever, or he has, is different. But he clearly is a monarchist in this regard, right? and I actually think it's wrapped up in his idealism, because monarchism is like an idealistic view of politics, because it requires the ideal king to be really functioning.
Yeah.
But that's what Tolkien is looking for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot to say, and like maybe some of the things like Derry pulled this up, and she said the follow-on for Tolkien's Sam is that he becomes gentrified. Frodo gives him Bag End. Sam rises from the working class all the way to nobility. And what I've seen people say is, well, Frodo should not be in a position to give him that. Like,
basically what happens is like he gets co-opted right into
the
ruling class, right? So it's like as a reward for being a good servant, you now get to have others serve you. I totally get the criticisms, right? I totally get them. I just what I'm wary of is like, if you're going to critique the work, we need to make sure we're understanding on its own terms first, right? Like that's the big thing. What is Tolkien trying to say first? Then let's look at the other things here. I'm not saying anyone in the chat is guilty of that.
Oh no, I don't think anyone, like, I'm not taking that stance,
for the prolonged discussion for it. Let's just understand the work on its own terms and then bring that stuff into conversation, because I feel like we exist in this reading culture currently, and it's like this for every kind of consumption, where the first reaction is, how can we critique this thing? And I think that's just it's the wrong impulse.
Well, there are people who like being that person, and they have a lens. You can do all types of critical readings of things, whether it be, I mean, you just name one. You can do many. The critical theory is a book that I was recommended by AP, and I read, and I realized that I was not a critic and never will be, because I don't read like that. I don't really want to, I don't think, but I think it's very tempting to be that person. It is. It's a good way to get people to listen to you.
It feels good, right? It feels good to tell other people that they're wrong. So, but in order, you got to kind of earn the right to do it. I guess that's the view. That's like the whole motivation behind the Ayn Rand book. And I saw people like looking up like how long those books are. Yeah, they're long. they're long. And but someone deserves to actually be read on their own terms first. Basically, yeah. And the thing that convinced me about this, by the way, for Ayn Rand, was reading a biography of her, which was very critical. It was very critical of her in the end. And I left with a negative impression of Ayn Rand. But I thought, you know what? Before I say anything else, I'm going to read the books. Like and I thought that was the mark of a really great biography. Yeah,
I think that's I think it's a noble move to read them all and then to make your statement, especially if you're going to do it public facing and do like a video about it. You got a lot of projects, but there's a project that is a collaboration of sorts that we should talk about.
I'm wondering like if people have ever thought while watching this video or the previous one, wow, I wish Jared and Jimmy would do this more often. And I wish that they would do it on topics of philosophical interest that Jared chose and then made Jimmy talk about. And if they've ever thought those two thoughts, we have fantastic news for them.
Yes, we certainly do, because the layman man, the blue collar worker, as it will be, will have to do a battle of the minds with a true philosopher.
That's right. A couple times a month going forward, starting roughly in June. Though it's the exact launch little
things have changed a little.
But we're gonna do it. Is that Jimmy and I are going to be doing a podcast together. The title is going to be called Featherless Bipeds, which I think is a great title. And the artist who did our art loves this. Our mascot is a chicken for reasons we will explain one day. And we're going to talk about philosophy together. And I specifically, I had the idea. I hope you don't mind me revealing that. This wasn't your, but my thought was like, I like talking about philosophy, but I wanted to talk about it with someone who wasn't a philosopher, but who I thought was an interesting person and could like have an interesting conversation about the stuff. And so, Jimmy is my Samwise. Yes. So, and I'm basically, so I was like, I think Jimmy's the perfect person for this. And it's not just because Jimmy is intelligent. He'll say he's dumb, but he's wrong. and he'll say that, like, you know, he's like unlistenable or whatever, and he's wrong about that. But one of the reasons I liked about it is because Jimmy is like the perfect everyman. He plays the everyman super well, and I think that's the interesting thing. You're actually you're very intelligent, you're very insightful, and you're very thoughtful, but you play the everyman super well, and I think it's going to work on the podcast really well. So
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to expose myself to like just new ideas and stuff. Because I'm not a philosopher. I've not read much philosophy, but I've always enjoyed hearing about it. You know, whether mainly you and Greg Sadler are the people that I would say have been influences on me. And then also reading, like honestly, reading a lot of stuff, and then getting to talk to Erickson, and then him talking philosophy and stuff. Very interesting. I'm excited. I think it's a challenge in a way for me.
I think so. I think it will be,
Yeah.
but I think it'll be good. Like, I feel really good. You know, the original title we had for this was An Idiot's Guide to Philosophy.
Yes.
And and I'm glad we didn't go with that. I'm glad we didn't go with it with that, because it would seem like I was guiding the idiot, would have been the way that it was going to play. But honestly, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Mhm.
I think the dynamic's going to work really, really well. You and I are talking about at least occasionally maybe filming stuff in person, you know, one day. I think that would be great. Basically, we're just going to try to make this real. You know, this is kind of getting wrapped up in my push to be full time. As someone else put it, either in an email or a comment, it's my desire to become the emperor of philosophy YouTube. And and if I have to like make Jimmy into a vassal of mine to do this, I suppose, you know, there is no emperor unless you have many kings and lords who serve you. But but no, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. I want to talk about friendship early on. I think because that's an interesting philosophical thing, ties in with the other stuff there. I think talking about nihilism though early on is going to be a big one, because
Yeah, well, I was about to say, I think that's one of the things that maybe I'm even a little bit nervous about, is like maybe some of my views will change on these things. And I've never really
yeah,
fit into a bucket per se. I'm not a big
yeah,
bucket
yeah,
person or label
yeah.
person. So I think it's an opportunity for me, obviously, to learn, but also to learn about myself, which will be fun. And I would never have done this thing because it's outside of reading, right? Like put me on any book show, I'm fine. Like I'm comfortable. So getting outside of my comfort zone, it's the sink or swim thing that we talked about at the beginning of the
Yeah, yeah.
episode. And I feel like I'm going to be Michael Phelps. I think I'm going to swim a whole bunch and smoke weed. No, I'm just kidding. Well, maybe not, but
Yeah.
I would only do this with someone about these topics that would meet me on like on a fair, even playing ground of respect. And I know that you have that for me. So like, I don't feel as intimidated. I am intimidated, but I don't feel as scared as I probably
So I
would
think
with
this is
someone else.
important. This is one of the reasons actually we wouldn't want to use the idiot's guide, right?
Yeah.
Because the joke would quickly be that I was guiding the idiot. But like
Yes.
that's not how I want this to be. Yeah, I'm the one who like went to grad school for philosophy, but like
Mhm.
we're meeting as equals here.
Yeah.
I might be like guiding the conversation a little bit because it's just the way the format's going to work, but we're
Yes.
meeting there to like debate stuff, you
Yeah.
know.
And
And
you
if
have a
it
better idea of what is like approachable or compelling to talk about from a
yeah.
philosophical perspective.
No. And if I ever like dismiss you as like, oh, you just don't know what you're talking about when you say something, then I haven't done my job, right? I haven't done my
Yeah.
job. So I think honestly, I'm really excited about this. I think it's gonna be really fun.
Yeah.
Um,
I do too. I think
yeah,
nihilism is definitely something I'm curious to talk it out, because like I don't necessarily like the out view like I have on things, you know?
yeah. I mean, I don't want you to answer this question, but the thing I want you to think about right now, like for
Okay.
later, is like what led you to being a nihilist? Like what were
Ooh.
the questions you asked? Because
Hmm.
I suspect what happened is you started asking some questions and you didn't answer them in a satisfactory manner, and you eventually kind of became a nihilist because of it. And I want to
Hmm.
know what those questions were. You
Yeah,
know, like
that would be
those are the kinds of questions, like things we're going to be doing
mhm.
on the stream,
Yeah, a
or
bit
you know,
more
on the podcast.
of it exposing myself, I think, which not in the
Yeah,
physical manner. You can check out
yeah.
my OnlyFans for that, but this is going to be interesting. I'm sure that also the you know the fact that you're someone who's religious and I am
Mhm.
someone
Yeah,
who is not will play a role in that, and I think we both respect each other
yeah,
enough that it'll
absolutely,
be fun to
absolutely.
talk about. So, hmm,
I would love for us to talk about God someday. You know, I think that's got to be kind of like a later one where we've earned a lot of viewer trust.
yeah,
But you know, yeah. But for instance, T. Baggins just asked, we discuss epistemology, and honestly, one of my great loves is like philosophical skepticism, like the claim that we cannot ever know that we know anything. And I would love to like talk through some of those arguments and issues with people, because I bet that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like I go down that rabbit hole by myself on certain topics, and then I just end up saying, well, like, who cares? You know, that's one worry I do have is that I get so far. So I was talking to my friend again, his name's Oso. We were talking about free will, and I, you know, we're going back and forth, and Sapolsky has his book that came out called Determine, and it's all about determinism. And then there's been rebuttals, and it, you know, it's always just not a noise around this thing. I used to be really interested by the free will conversation, but I've also just decided that it doesn't really matter, because I'm never going to not act like I don't have free. Like, I always will act if I have free will, whether I have it or not. So it's not actionable. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I kind of see that. You know, it's only kind of relevant sort of reflexively, right? Like we sort of think, oh, okay, now I know this. How do I change, right? And for most people, the answer is going to be no. Like, Sapolsky does not live his life any differently. No, thinking that he doesn't have free will.
It'd be illogical to do so.
Are bad, by the way. I think Sapolsky's arguments are bad for determinism.
Are you not a fan of his?
Well, I mean, I just like thinking it's not about being a fan here. It's just like I think that the arguments that I saw, like in summary, didn't seem very convincing to me. Okay. I would want to, before we discuss them like critically, I'd want to actually like get them into premises and things like this and think about this.
Yeah.
But you know, the truth is, the dominant view of free will for hundreds of years has been a view called compatibilism, which is basically this view that you are causally determined and yet still free. And so if you think that those two things are compatible in some fashion, then you need to be able to like talk about that at least a little bit when you're doing your defenses. And I think with Sapolsky, he just didn't do it. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, it's also purely academic at this point. I don't think I don't see us solving that in my lifetime for sure. One, because it's not a moneymaker. It is not going to lead to any money being made, so I don't see how it'll ever be a priority in our world. But I just think about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm a whole lot less interested in this thing, because I just don't. I think if you came out tomorrow and said we have actually 100% proven that there is no free will, I don't think it changes much. Ted Chiang has a story about this, and Jake Bishop hated that story, hated it, because he said, you know, basically bad things started happening. People were taking drastic measures because they figured out they didn't have free will. And he's like, I don't think that would happen. And at the time I had disagreed with him, but the longer I've been on with it, I'm like, you know, I actually think I agree. I don't think it would change anything. It's not like aliens visiting, you know, I don't think it's like
that. I think if you're looking at like, what are the big things that would rock our worldview, right? Aliens landing is like number one, like 100%. It's like that or dolphins talking. Like it's it's literally one of those two things. Like,
and then we gotta worry because SeaWorld's put us in a bad spot.
Exactly. We are gonna feel all those Japanese fishing ships. Ooh, not good. Not good. Ooh. So yeah, you know, like those are the ones that would be genuinely paradigm shifting. And then, but like someone that demonstrably proved we have no free will, because like what would have happened if we figured that out is like, oh, it turns out we were fine the whole time, right? If you like proved that we had no free will, it'd be like looking back and be like, oh, okay, well I didn't have free will the whole time, but it seemed like things were working out.
you know? Like it'd
be really easy to console yourself, I think.
Yeah, and also,
but I mean, if like a dolphin pops up and says like, hey man, I do not like how you fish for tuna,
I think that would have
like, damn, this is good. This is like,
and then there'd be about like 20% of people who just say, no, that was an AI dub. It didn't really happen.
Yeah,
and they live in that reality, which is terrifying. But I agree with you. I don't think it has much. I mean, the only thing that I find interesting about the determinism argument is that it could lead to more empathy for people, because we then start to say, well, you know, this thing or this thing is not controllable.
This is something that comes up in the Stoics a little bit, but not with determinism, though they are deterministic. But for instance, Marcus Aurelius is basically saying when someone's done you wrong, what you need to remember is like all the bad things that have led them to not understand what right action is, like what doing good would be, because they believe that all badness is a result of ignorance, basically. And so basically, when someone has done something bad to you, your response should be pity, like, "Oh, you poor thing, you didn't know how to act rightly."
Yeah.
Which actually ends up being a kind of like very powerful attitude to take.
Pity's a weird
So
one though.
yeah, yeah.
Pity,
A lot of
pity's
people don't like it because it feels elitist, right? You're putting yourself above them or something.
yeah. I mean,
But when you're thinking about it as the perspective of someone who has been done wrong, and then you
yes.
look at it and say, "Oh, you poor thing, you didn't know how to act right," like
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes that pat on the back and encouragement, or acknowledgement of the slight actually is the part of the healing process too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I completely disagree. It says aliens wouldn't change anything. LOL, just another animal. I think that is
No, dude.
wildly not
Alien
the case.
aliens land and they can, like, talk. They can
And
communicate in some fashion, or we struggle to communicate, but they were able to get here. Oh my gosh,
like
like,
getting here
we
alone is
we
insane.
would we would be blown away. Oh my gosh, and dude, Putin and Biden would be best friends the next day after after they showed up, because 'cause they'd be like, we're buds now because 'cause we're Earthlings." It would
Yeah,
totally change it would
it would
totally
shift the
change.
perspective of
It would
people.
totally change our perspective. Yeah, yeah.
And as
The
someone who,
three body problem actually talks about this fairly well.
yeah,
When you figure out that, like, there's, like, aliens, how to, like, geopolitics and stuff respond. It ends up being complicated, but impactful. Yeah.
yeah, and also just travel alone, if they were able to travel light years and survive, just that alone would probably completely reshape the idea of like what's possible in transportation and stuff. Shot says it wouldn't change a lot in my life. Well, that's unless if they came in, started zapping us and putting us in ant colonies, then maybe you would feel different.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And some people wouldn't believe it was real anyway. So there's definitely that. But planetary politics, what a nightmare.
But,
Yeah.
like, but you are right about one thing, which is, like, if aliens land, I'm still gonna take care of my son, right? Like, he's
Yes.
gonna get up in the morning and I'm gonna feed him, right? There are
Yes.
certain things that never change.
Yeah, I do think maybe it would have that moment of like, if you've ever had someone pass away close to you and everything, the next day you're still getting a call about making sure to renew your insurance, and you're like, how can anything be happening right now while this is happening?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that would probably be a realistic feeling for like many, many, many people,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you would still have to feed yourself or feed your child. You would still probably, honestly, probably still go to work.
You
You'd
probably
probably
would,
still
yeah,
have to go
yeah,
to
yeah,
work,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
depending on where they land and how much damage is done. I always just assume it's not going to be a peaceful exchange. But
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, 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 fair
my
enough. Yeah, yeah.
pessimism
No,
coming.
honestly, at this point in my life, I'm like, don't go to work. Don't go. They're just gonna cut you, man. They're just gonna
I will. When I got laid off, I will tell you, my entire perception of businesses and what a job was completely changed.
The hardest part for me was that because I was working at a company that, like, talked about its mission so much, you almost believe them, right? You almost
Yeah,
believe it when you're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
dude.
we're all in it together and we're all
Yeah,
doing this thing," and then
and then you get cut.
then they make the announcement. You get an email that says you're being laid off. You goes, "Oh, okay, okay, it was BS, right?" Like it was all BS.
Yeah, and you
So
also start to realize that you can separate yourself from those type of statements or those
yeah, yeah,
that feeling they're trying to create, and still do a
yeah,
good job. Like, you can still show up and do your job, and you don't have to be dedicated. Because like, I took a lot of pride in my job, but now I take more pride in my work, if that makes sense.
yeah, 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 yeah. I see that. Yeah.
It's way less about like who I work for, but more so like what I bring to the table as a talent or as a worker.
Maybe
Uh,
I'll feel very differently about this in like a couple of months when I realize that I can't sustain myself full time. But currently, I'm like, man, corporate work, who would ever do it? Like,
yeah.
it all sucks. It's all for squares, and like no one knows.
Wage slave is
Yeah,
was what my friends
exactly,
always called me, who didn't
exactly.
work. They wanted me to play WoW.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what they
exactly.
would call me. Yeah, I think it's it's a tricky thing. Yeah, you read Stoner by John Williams, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so that book is about John Williams' belief that like being obsessed with your job and focused only on that is like a solid thing. Like that's something that is kind of forgotten. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest with you, because after reading Remains of the Day, which by the way, Alan's reading and loves,
excellent,
another win for the Alan column. But Remains of the Day is, in my opinion, the opposite side of that equation, where you see everything that you have missed out on by dedicating yourself to this craft that is, in this case, kind of going away.
The art of being a butler.
The art of being a butler is going away. And also what you let go as a butler and who you serve, and you don't have control over. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to this book, but to boil it down to this point is like, I feel like Stoner is the pro job book and Remains of the Day is a warning about it.
Yeah. I feel like, has Alan read Clara and the Sun?
No. This is his first Ishiguro.
Because I'm thinking, Ishiguro is what I say, but because I think he'll like that book a lot, like Remains of the Day. But I can imagine Alan's reaction to Clara and the Sun. Have you read that one?
I haven't. It is either the next or the next book.
He's gonna do an 8-minute book review that's gonna be like, and there are these robots that are, the friends and artificial friends, but they won't just say they're robots the whole time or something. It's gonna be like, it's gonna be propetarians all over again.
No.
I could just imagine Alan's gonna hate that. Alan would hate that book in particular, and I really like it. So
I'm so careful with what I recommend to Alan, and I told him, I said, like, you need to read this. Like,
one thing I really like about Alan, to be clear, I hope he's
just one thing,
but just one thing is okay. So a lot of people on YouTube in the book space, I know there are outliers, but I just don't interact with them at all. They're really the ones that like I see are very, very friendly and agreeable, almost to a fault, right? Oh, I love this book, and someone was like, I didn't like it, and they're like, well, that's okay, we can still be friends. Let's hold hands and skip through a field, right? And Alan's like, this book sucks. It's like, this book sucks. I don't understand why anyone likes it.
Just like completely not willing to accept.
It sucks, and you are a moron. And like, I think every sort of sphere needs at least a few people like that. He doesn't go around like picking fights. He's just like, it sucks. Like, he just says it. And I think like you need that. It's like a healthy part of the ecosystem. And Alan just is that for like fantasy literature and stuff. So it's one of the reasons I like him. He was wrong about Le Guin. He just like completely botched and didn't properly read The Dispossessed, but he was willing to say what he thought was bad about it. So and for that I love him. So not even like him. I love Alan. So
I love Alan as well. I think those people are super important. And sometimes I feel like Alan just says things out loud that like everyone has been thinking. And I always appreciate that. He comes on a stream first day, what is with all these top 10 videos? And you're like, yeah, there are a lot of top 10 videos. You're right. And he's like, this is ridiculous. And he goes on this big tirade. And by the end of it, we're somehow in the education system. And you're like,
yeah. I'm going to just like look up, has he ever done a top 10 video?
He has, actually. So funny story about Alan is he was making his top 10 video for his top 10 authors. And he does one every year. And I said, this time put major changes with a question mark, like clickbait it, because it's something he would never do. And then he did it.
That's good.
So it was like this big inside joke. Most people just look at me like, oh, that's a YouTube title. But for me and Alan, it was a good giggle. We had
there's this science fiction booktuber, Bookpilled. His best performing video ever is like top 10 science fiction, like 2023 update, or something. It's like, and he just does them every year. And I totally respect his work, but it's just very funny that was the one that took off for some reason. Got like a million views.
Yeah, he's a channel that people really enjoy. I do think updating yearly makes sense if you read a lot of books, because things can change. Like my list from when I started BookTube to now is so different, and then there's the internal struggle if you read multiple genres, like how do you mesh these things into one list, which is kind of difficult.
But what sucks is like, I'm just looking at Bookbuild, who is actually someone I watch fairly regularly. But yeah, he has got like this one, 15 best science fiction books I've ever read, updated. That's the one. And it's like 950,000 views. Great. He did that again this year. Updated again, 170. It'll probably continue to do well. but then he just goes through it and just like nothing else gets anywhere close to it. And that's the frustrating part, right? Is just that like people won't tune in for the other stuff. And I get it, because that like top 15 is like super highly information dense for them compared to a 30-minute book review of one book. I totally get it. I totally get it from their perspective. It does suck from someone who just like wants to talk about books. And it's actually why in my future stuff, I'm not talking about books. Like I'm not doing book stuff so much. Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes back to kind of what you said, is like you want to make an impact on that small amount of people who are really into what you're doing, that know that what like you're passionate about what you're doing. And that's what a book review does do. I mean, I think that is my channel is still to this day, the majority of it is book reviews, even though I haven't done a book review in like a year and a half or something. You know, I built a community around those series and then talking about them, and in some cases disliking series also builds, but
he might have his 1,000 people, right?
Oh, I think he
like
does.
On his Patreon or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know what your Patreon's like. You don't have to say your numbers here. You know, you can tell them to me later when we do our financial reveal. But you know, maybe one day you'll have like those 1,000 or something like that. Like that could be the thing. It doesn't require getting 100,000 views or 1,000,000 views on a video.
Yeah.
What's the most watched video on your channel?
It's my way. I don't check regularly, but it should be my Way of Kings review, around like 40 or 45,000 views or something like that.
You don't check regularly.
I really don't. I really don't. All right. I'm clicking popular. 52,000.
Yeah. Okay. Way of Kings, no spoiler. That one's interesting. It's interesting that your most popular video is a review.
I mean, look at my top row. They're all reviews, but the Mazurk one obviously doesn't feel as reviewy. But yeah,
I get this one called "I Finally Read the Name of the Wind" by Patrick Rothfuss. Should have been parentheses, and it sucks.
Hey, I started with so. I finally read. See, I'm telling you, so is the keyword.
Yeah.
So funny. I should have put it sucks. I actually love that review for one reason and one reason only. I bought a rotating disc to put the illustrated version on, and if you watch that video, I passed it like this ambient light and it's rotating, and it took me so long to get that shot, and no one cared that it was in the video but me. But for some reason, you know, that was one of those times.
That's the thing, man. Occasionally you'll put in a lot of work on this like one little thing. And I think that's have you ever done like a top 10 anything on your
only
you did a top 10 of like 2022, but that's different.
Only year end. Yeah. So I've actually always, the reason why I started a channel was to do top 10s. That's the truth. But I felt like I had to read more. And I am at the point now where I feel comfortable putting out a top 10 list about some things.
So I would say like I don't want to like tell you do this all the time, but honestly, put one out like next month. Put out your top 10 because I want to see how it does.
Strictly an A/B test.
I mean, it's part of this. Like, I just want to see it because you're actually a really interesting case. You have a very defined niche, right? Everyone in this chat, right? And there's about, I don't know, 120 people watching or so. I'm just like guessing
roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at me. So I'm all of them have read like a bunch of modern and classic fantasy and like some like science fiction, right? They've all kind of bought into you as like someone who's read the stuff, and they like watching you talk to like idiots like me, you know? and so I'm not an idiot simplicator, by the way. It's just that I'm 3 beers in, like that.
That's the 3 beer tip.
This is the 3 beer tip. But so when you do a top 10, that like means a lot, right? When I did a top 10 fantasy, why would anyone watch it? I put Brandon Sanderson at number 10 because I thought like, well, I kind of like the Cosmere, but like, you know, obviously he shouldn't be anywhere close to a top 10 for anybody. It should be bottom of the like. He's the books that I use when I cut one table leg too short by a mile. Like this is, and so what I want from you is like, I thought through it. I read this stuff. I know it. My audience is like all bought in. Here is my top 10. You know what I mean? Like you are close to being like the authority. Like you are.
I don't know about that.
It would no, but it would mean a lot. It would mean a lot if the craziest thing to me actually is that my top 10s, the one that did the worst is my top 10 philosophy books. It's like that's the only one that I'm qualified to talk about. It's the only one where I know more than anyone on YouTube.
Like, Jared, shut up. Shut up.
And yet my top 10 fantasy books, because I put Tolkien on the cover and wrote not number one. Just like on the thumbnail, just did super well. So so anyway, I think I would love to see your top. I would love to see your top 10 fantasy, because it would mean something. The other person who I wish would do a top 10 fantasy is Bridger. And that's because Bridger has read everything. He loves the genre. And I just want to see what he would say.
And he never will make that video.
He won't do it. He won't do it. And I feel like I could email him every week for the next couple of years, and he would dutifully respond, and he would say, "Thank you. I understand, but no." And you would be able to read it in his voice, and it would be lovely and soothing, and you would play back the recording in your mind to fall asleep. But like, he would never.
Yeah, if you want to be discouraged from making a top 10, message Bridger, because he'll tell you why top 10s are flawed, because we do not have the rubric, and all these things. And I'm like, Bridger, I got you.
There was one book list that he ever said was good, and it's by a channel that we don't talk about anymore. It was by a channel who was disgraced. So I won't. Hopefully, because it was like 175 books or something like that, right? And he liked it because it
was massive. I was a part of that video, and I reported it because I wanted it taken down, because I was like, I don't want this. I don't want to be associated with this at all. But
we can move fast past that.
Yeah.
Bridger, wonderful, absolutely. Wonderful. And he'll never make it. And yet, I bet his top 10 fantasy would be the most illuminating list ever. It would be so interesting. His Arthur video, he did 2 videos about King Arthur. I don't know, a lot of people know this about me. I am like a huge King Arthur nerd. Like,
are you really?
Yes, I like love all things related to King Arthur. Hold on one second. Let me grab this book. I can show you here. I haven't even taken it out of the plastic. This is a first edition of John Steinbeck's retelling of Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur. Like, right? So this is the Acts of King Arthur and his noble knights.
That is sick.
Yeah.
Also, I just love that edition.
Yes. Yeah, right. It rules. Really totally rules. I love King Arthur. Yes, absolutely. And he did the best video ever about King Arthur.
Yeah.
Like, and he did 2 of them. He did 2. Yeah. And so,
he thinks out everything very much in detail, and like, he really considers like, how can I make this so this lasts for like 10 years, like, and it's educational and informative still.
Yeah.
Which is why he's awesome.
I've gotten like 4 Arthur questions suddenly, and I have to say this. Okay. So going through them really quickly. No, Evie, I don't love the idealized monarchical system. I personally am an anarchist. So this is the thing. I just love King Arthur. I think it's great. Thank you, Green Obino 1, for saying that I look like an English king. That might mean that I look like I married my cousin. And then Paul Ramberg, do I have an opinion about on Warlord Chronicles? It rules. It's great. It's so good. It's so good. It has one of the best endings of a trilogy like ever. It rules. Every single bit of it's good. The only thing is, like, Derval is like himself not super compelling as like but he ends up kind of being the blank slate for you. He's just like the virtuous guy who gets the girl. And honestly, for all the other things I love about the series, I'm willing to forgive it. I love it. Yeah. I love it. And I love it actually that Derval is actually based on Saint Derval, who is like a recognized saint and stuff. So he's like a historical figure.
Yes.
And I love how much attention to weird historical detail are in those books. But yeah, the sort of mystery of like, where is he going? Well, you'll go wherever Merlin says you'll go when they get on the boat. Oh my gosh. And they're fighting at the end just so Arthur can get on the boat. It's
tremendous.
It's tremendous. It is so.
It's worth reading just for Merlin, to be honest. Merlin's the best in that. Evie wants to know what's your opinion on Lancelot and the Arthurian legends.
Lancelot and the Arthurian legend, like, so when you're saying in the Arthurian legends, what do you mean? So the thing about Lancelot is like he's just like retold through many different sort of prisms, right? Mm-hmm. So my favorite Lancelot probably is in the Once and Future King, just because he becomes the main character. Right. So like Arthur ends up just not mattering that much for a huge part of the book.
Mhm.
And his struggles are really interesting because I love like his particular struggles with sorry, I saw Jake just said Jared has basically become tipsy and has just become Alan, which is which is yeah.
It's kind of a compliment.
So what I love in T.H. White though is Lancelot is like struggling through this kind of like medieval Christian ideal of purity, and also struggling through his own just all-encompassing love of Guinevere.
Mhm.
And he has to struggle through both of those. What's weird about that book is like his friendship to Arthur is not the main struggle, despite the fact that it should be like near the top, right? Like he's like, it's
Mhm.
not just that he's like sleeping with a married woman, right? And it's like
Right.
compromising his view of purity. He's sleeping with his best friend's wife.
Yeah.
Like that should be slightly
Which is
played
not
up in that book, I
cool.
think. No, exactly. But anyway, I think I love Lancelot there, but I love how in, for instance, the Warlord Chronicles, Lancelot is a completely different character, and I've
Mhm.
never hated a character quite so much. And so I felt him very deeply there. And so I love the depiction, but it almost hurt me because of how much I love Lancelot from T.H.
That's why
White.
some people do not like Warlord Chronicles. I've seen people say they object to the Lancelot representation in Warlord Chronicles. Like they're like, no, we do not like this, and
Yeah.
we hate it. A bunch of people, Beltu was being one of them, and also Greeno Bino is wondering if you've seen Excalibur from the
I have
80s.
I have not. No, the sort of Arthur movie that got it started for me was Sword in the Stone, which then
Mhm.
when I read T.H. White, I was like, oh, this is what it is, right? Like this is what it's all about. Like I didn't realize it. Um, Favorite Arthur adaptation might just be Mallory, just because it's like sort of the classic and it's like the one that is like the reference point.
Mm.
Though I really do think the Steinbeck is really, really solid and really interesting. Steinbeck is another of those like amazing and great American writers who slowly begins by adapting Mallory and then it slowly kind of comes into his own in weird ways. And so it's it's great. It's great. The Green Knight, I don't know if it counts, right? It involves Arthur, but Arthur isn't like the figure,
Great movie
right?
though.
It's a good movie.
I like it.
And I like the poem itself. Like it's that itself is worth reading.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that movie. It's one of the few movies I've watched people get up and walk out of because they were sold that it was like a fantasy action movie, and then it was almost a silent movie, and people were pissed in my theater.
Oh,
They were
interesting.
so first
Yeah.
movie I saw like post COVID was actually The Green Knight, and it was very
Oh wow,
very
yeah. I
yeah
like how weird the world is, right? And there's
yeah.
something this weird thing like when you read like British literature from before a certain time where they think like you go over one hill and there must be giants, right? And you're like you
Mm.
could just go over the hill and you could find out if there were giants. And they're like, well, no, because there are giants there, so we shouldn't go check it out. Like the person who went over the hill to find out if there were giants got eaten by the giants. So
Yeah.
we can't know. But I like the Green Knight a lot. I like the ending of the Green Knight, which was like oddly humorous and stuff. And I think a lot of people thought that was like a little weird and stilted. But I think it's actually very in keeping with a lot of like medieval literature, which is often like very ironic and like humorous in a lot of ways. I had a friend, not a friend, a professor of mine. Um, we're all friends in some grand cosmic sense, but a professor of mine in undergrad who was like, postmodernism, everyone says like it got invented around like the time of like Pynchon or something. And she was a little drunk when she said this, but like I think honestly, if you read Geoffrey Chaucer, it's all there.
Yeah, there was always a precursor, right?
And just here, well, Geoffrey Chaucer though is like the precursor of English. Like,
Yeah,
and so for her to say the Canterbury Tales is where you find postmodernism is like
that kind of
there
blows
wasn't
up the whole
there
idea.
wasn't modernism.
Yeah,
Like there wasn't even Shakespeare at the time
we
of the Canterbury
skipped
Tales.
we
Yeah,
skipped
yeah,
the
yeah.
current.
So her point was just like it's all been here the whole time or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
postmodernism is one of those things that people say, and every
yeah.
now and then I think I understand it, but then in reality, I'm just like, I don't know if it actually matters at this
I'm
point.
sudden I'm suddenly reminded when people asked me earlier if I enjoyed like pew pew shoot 'em up alien
Yeah.
novels, but I want to say about fantasy, right? because like we were talking about science fiction, so we
Yeah.
went like John Carter. But like my favorite fantasy series ever is The Wheel of Time, which is not the deepest well. like
Yeah.
like let's be like I love it, but like it is very kind of like slash them up, kill the Trollocs, like it's an adventure story, right? And so I was just suddenly reminded of this fact.
Yeah, I always think about that about you, whenever I hear you, waxing poetically about philosophy and stuff. And I'm like, but the man still likes Wheel of Time. And I respect that.
That's
I
true. That's
respect
true.
that you still bend the knee to Rand al'Thor at the end
Yeah.
of the day. Oh, bland al'Thor, if you will.
Also, fantastic tie-ins with the Arthurian legend. He's
Yeah, I guess
Arthur
that's true,
Pangdrag,
huh?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, a lot of fantasy is Arthurian influence for
But
sure.
Moiraine is Merlin. Like that's like the
Yeah.
intention. She is supposed to be Merlin.
That's like from Robert Jordan?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like she is Merlin.
oh, I did not know this.
Because Rand is Arthur.
Right. Well,
Rand is Arthur
that I could make.
born, but then she is Merlin.
Wow. I've always just thought of her as like female Gandalf.
What happens to Merlin after in a lot of the stories, right? Merlin goes into a cave where he is trapped outside of time. Right? What happens to Moiraine when they have to rescue her from the tower? She's frozen outside of time.
Okay. I could see that. That's really interesting. I did not know about that. For all the fantasy I read, and I like to look up author interviews quite a bit. I actually love doing it most of the time. Sometimes people end up being idiots, and I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't know this. But Robert Jordan is one that I've just never really read an interview from. Like I've never really dove to.
If you listen to the audiobooks of Wheel of Time or whatever, the last file at the end will always be the same interview with Robert Jordan.
Really?
At least on the old ones.
Oh.
Not the new ones with whoever played Moiraine in the adaptation, whose name I can't recall suddenly. But yeah, the old ones, it's there. And it's him talking about actually the influence of like Eastern philosophy and the idea of like recurrence.
Yeah.
In it. Yeah.
Interesting.
But if we want to talk about like non-slash 'em up, Rosamund Pike, that's the right answer. Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, both Evie and Fantasy to Wash. That would have been a 1 point, like a 1 beer, Jared point to remember. But I wanted to ask you a question, Jimmy. I know we're over 2 hours. I'm sorry if I'm keeping you for way too long from you and your family and everything you want to do with all your goals. But I want to know, you finished Lord of Emperors.
Oh yeah. I sure did.
I know it's easy to get spoilery, and if we have to, like, we can do it. But because what's so great is like that series is so not like a slash 'em up. It's like
it's not very epic,
and yet it has some of the best action scenes. The 2 chariot races, you get 1 race per book. It's the best. It rules. And the second chariot race in Lord of Emperors
is incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. And I'll keep it spoiler free because I know there's a lot of people that have been like waiting for me to read it to see what I thought. And I honestly think Lord of Emperors is like top notch. And I said this in the reading vlog that I did. It's just like Gavriel Kay has a knack for like making drama of just a certain time and place in history in this world like mean everything. And it doesn't have to be a big war. It doesn't have to be dragons coming in, or it doesn't have to be really much of anything. But the man just understands how to build drama and build around it in a spiral and look at it from different angles. And the chariot racing is just incredible.
To try not to spoil too much, but we are in Vex territory here. In those 2 books, there are at least 2 encounters where a person literally meets a god, and they are not dramatic parts of the books.
No, they're very, I don't want to say forgettable, but they're not the most remarkable. And that's why I'm so confused as to why Gavriel Kay doesn't get adaptations, because the budget would be crazy. I mean, you're talking about like something similar to like the Pillars of the Earth adaptation, probably budget wise, right? And if you got some really talented actors, I mean, you could pull dialogue directly from the books. It would be super impressive. The Sarantine Mosaic is tremendous, just absolute slammer of a duology, and only Song for Our Bond lives on top of that for me. That's my favorite from Gavriel Kay, because the Troubadours are pretty dope.
So did you read I remember listening to what you were saying about like, why didn't he just write this about the Byzantine Empire, right?
Yeah, like he could have easily, like you could make the show that.
And I totally get that. Did you read the little postscript like quote from Yeats at the end of Lord of Emperors?
I don't think so.
So let me read it. I pulled it up. So
Okay.
This is from Yeats' A Vision, which is, I think that if I could be given a month of antiquity and leave to spend it where I chose, I would spend it in Byzantium, a little before Justinian opened St. Sophia and closed the Academy of Plato. I think I could find inns. I think I could find in some little wine shop some philosophical worker of mosaic. I just changed the page. Who could answer all my questions, the supernatural descending nearer to him. That's from Yeats. He is just describing Crispin, and he has to find a way to get him to Byzantium, or to Constantinople essentially, and has to put him in a wine shop. And he wrote 2 whole freaking books to make good on that.
Now, here's an interesting thing I didn't know. Jake Bishop told me this. If you had to guess, do you think that guy Gavriel Kay plots out his books, like outlines them very strictly?
I think he does. I think he does. Yeah.
Doesn't. Isn't that insane?
Oh no, that's wild. Yeah.
He's a discovery writer. He just makes it up as he goes. That is insane.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on. Laura is slandering Constantine for a second. Constantine is why we have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, for instance. It is like all these big monuments that we have are because of Constantine. I will not hear the Constantine slander. It's easy to do, but I'm sorry, Laura. You're just wrong about this. Yeah.
It sounds like I have another guest I need to bring you on to debate.
Just totally wrong. And his mother alone, because of Helena, is
He stole.
He's the emperor. He's the emperor. He can't steal anything. It's all his.
Oh no. Maybe you are a fascist, Jared. Maybe. That's what all this was 2.5 hours about, was actually figuring out that you are in fact the fact.
Exactly. I'm the one that Moorcock was writing again.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I have a fun tidbit before I let you go on this beautiful Friday evening that I think you will find really interesting. Michael Moorcock loves Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker book.
Oh, wild. Okay, yeah.
I think
that's actually what I think.
Sword.
I think that is the best. I think that's the best.
Cosmere book.
Sanderson. Yeah, I think that's the best Sanderson book. Yeah.
I like that book quite a bit. I was shocked when I read, because I always read like endorsements. I like to see what other people, you can find out authors know each other. It's strange. Like Robin Hobb and Jay Kristoff are friends. Like I would have never guessed that. But man, Michael Moorcock did not just endorse the book. I mean, he wrote like a lengthy endorsement of it. And I was like, this dude hates literally everyone. And this is where he was like, you know what?
That's very funny. Yeah.
I like the Mormon guy.
I like the Mormon with color magic. Like this was the thing that got me to like him. Yeah.
I think it was the talking sword. I have a feeling.
Oh, okay.
I think that he saw that and was like, yeah, he's cooking. Yeah.
So Warbreaker is at least interesting because it has like one good twist, right? So and there's like at least one like solid twist there. Yeah. I feel like almost bummed by how much I've turned against Sanderson in the last like year and a half or so.
It would appear you have turned a lot on Sanderson.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's just,
I think it's the desire of wanting him to be your favorite author. Because I feel this at times too. Like I want him to be my favorite author because he publishes so much.
I wish I could get into the hype. Yeah. Brand Sell Books is saying Jared the anarchist Henderson defending emperors stealing because he's the emperor. It's all his. I'm just saying I don't know by what metric of property we're saying he stole things, other than look, I get it. I don't want there to be emperors. Like that's the big thing. But given that we had emperors, we got the Church of the Holy Sepulchre out of it and a few other things, and that part's nice.
But, I think we need to define emperor. No, I'm trying here.
This is my whole view. But I want to live in a world free of emperors. This is true. Yeah.
I think we can get behind that. Yeah. Jared, thanks for coming on again, dude. This was a whole lot of fun. I know that you're grinding, you're busy, you're going through huge life-changing events. So for you to take 2.5 hours out of your Friday and drink a couple beers and chat with me, I genuinely appreciate it, dude.
This was a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. Chat, you guys were great. I'm hoping that this really crazy array of topics, to be honest. Was entertaining for all of you. I would assume so, because you're all still here and you're all still wonderful. So thanks for being here, being the third guest as always. Jared, tell people where they can find, tell them about your Substack, just in case they
Well, you can go find Jared Henderson on YouTube. It comes up, but jaredhenderson.substack.com is the place to go and support me if you want to help me bring more philosophical content to YouTube and, help me keep the lights on. Because if I don't have the lights on, I can't stream with Jimmy. It's a whole thing. So
yeah, it is a problem. Without electricity, we're gonna have some hiccups, I think. So go support Jared. He's not just a great creator, a great philosopher, but I think he's a great guy, and I always appreciate him taking time to talk to me. So thank you again, Jared. Thank you so much. If you guys like this, hit like. If you dislike it, hit dislike. And if you think Jared's a fascist, subscribe to the Substack.
Do not dislike this. Like it only. This is the fascist coming out. Only like it. Only share it. Like it, share it, and post "I love this" in the comments. That's the only thing.
You will go to hell if you downvote this. That's what I've been told. But we appreciate you guys. Until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.